You can hear it too. I don't know why it's so stuck in my head, but it is. Yeah.
You're so dumb.
You love me.
I do.
Why would you call me dumb?
One thing can be two things.
Happy no. All right, I'm live. Send out the announcement. Testing. How's my audio? Audio looks good on OBS. Audio looks good on TikTok. I think audio will probably be good on YouTube. I think we're good. I think we're in the clear. Ready to build some bridge? I love building bridges, especially when I'm the lead engineer. No, wait, my dad's the lead engineer. No, wait, my dad's the lead engineer for a bunch of people there. No, wait, my dad worked on it. No, wait. If you were here yesterday, you get the reference. Howdy, howdy. Happy Pi Day. Happy Pi Day. I actually just picked up this book on recommendation by Danny. I haven't started it yet. I just got it yesterday. But I'm going to start reading it. It's by John Heil. I haven't. But I suspect this one will be good. It better be good. It was pretty, not cheap. What's your favorite read and analysis? I'm taking real analysis. I'm not like an analysis guy. I don't do analysis on the regular, so like I don't have a favorite read. How's it going? It's going all right. You proud of that? Proud of what? You guys are so mad about the books. Why are you not agnostic? Because I'm not like on the fence. Oh, I have to sneeze. Have I read The Divine Comedy? I have not read The Divine Comedy, but I'm fairly familiar with the story. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome all. Look at the light. What light? Were you always atheist? I mean, yeah, basically. Oh, yeah, yeah. So, funnily enough, the whole look at the light, it'll help you sneeze thing, that's only for a few people. It's like, what, like 12% of the population or something? I do have that. It's called the photic sneeze reflex. And it's really fascinating that this is a thing that exists. And more hilariously, yeah, it's not a super common thing. More hilariously, it's also known as the autosomal dominant chromosome. There's a name for it. It's called. Okay, it's called the autosomal dominant compelling helio-ophthalmic outburst syndrome. Which, if you're clever enough, they just made the name complicated so that it spells out achu. But yeah, it's called this. It's just a thing. It's very, very funny, in my opinion. It's achu syndrome, right? I don't think anyone could convince you like you couldn't convince a Christian to become an atheist. Well, it's definitely possible, right? Yeah, the Q-top argument, that was kind of wild. It was something else. But you know, Q-top is a lol cow, so we engage with him because it's good content. Have you heard of the bicameral mind theory by Julian Jaynes? I haven't. Yeah, Cat Sabbath, right? You'll pray for me? Well, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. You should read Incoherence of the Philosophers by Al-Ghazali. I mean, I guess I could. Is the Q-Top thing on YouTube? No, it was on his channel, so I wasn't recording it. Have you ever thought about majoring in astrophysics? I'm not college age. Why would I major in something? I have a PhD in physics. Like, what? Well, Sunlight Skydance, I appreciate you. All right, let's bring up Electric Being. Oh, I think I remember this guy.
Hey,
Electric
what's up?
Being, welcome back. What are we talking about today?
Glad to see you. Yeah, we're talking about consciousness, God, and you know the topic. So
Okay, yeah. So
I got a question.
Why should I believe?
Yeah. So do you believe science and biology, mathematics more than religion?
Do I believe those things? Well, they seem to be more effective at figuring out what's
do you trust
true.
them more than you trust religion?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the origins of those subjects, like science, like we get the names like Isaac Newton, who are believers in God, and they are like the origins and still considered the greatest scientists in history and today.
Sure.
So they had a concept of God as the eternal foundation of our existence, not as a deity, and they used God in their science books, but they slowly removed it through time. So it's only physical science and not the invisible world, which is not addressed anymore.
Okay. What does that have to do with anything?
So why would the greatest scientists, mathematicians use calculations including God, but they remove it through time, and
well, their
now we don't
calculations
have God?
their calculations didn't include God.
I mean, I've read their books on the light theory, the gravity theory. They mention God, don't they? Or
Yeah,
that's just my
they
mistake?
mention God. They like opine on God's existence and how God could have caused such and such a thing to happen, but it's not relevant to the calculations at all. It's not relevant
Just because
to the
I've
empirical
seen stuff
statements
like
being made, right?
So they argue that consciousness is not only like a physical thing, like a physical vessel. It's more than just a physical brain activity and neurons firing.
Okay,
Do you
well,
agree?
I mean, Isaac Newton didn't argue that. None of the ancient scientists or mathematicians argued that because they didn't know what neurons were.
But do you think that like consciousness is only a product of brain activity and neurons?
I mean,
or...
I suspect as much, but like I don't have any proof, so like I'd be happy to be convinced otherwise.
So the brain is not the source of consciousness. It's a receiver and filter of higher spiritual forces. Just like the radio cannot create music, but only receives the signal of music. And
Why
the
should I
brain
believe that?
channels. Because even science and your material science backs that up.
In what way?
How the brain produces thoughts instead of processing data, and how origins of self-awareness are beyond like neutral complexity.
What do you? Sorry, beyond like what complexity?
Neural. Sorry.
How does science back that up?
And I mean, even the existence of qualia, which is subjective experience, also shows that like we are not only a product of brain activity; it's more like higher spiritual forces.
How does that follow?
At least in my studies, that's where I come to the conclusion of. Oops, sorry.
But like, how does one like? Okay, premise 1, qualia exists. Premise 2, magic. Premise 3, therefore, the consciousness is not a product of the material. Like, how do you go from qualia to consciousness is not the product of the material?
I mean, because qualia shows like everybody has a subjective experience, and it's not like the brain produces the thoughts. It's like a receiver from the higher dimensions.
How do you get to that conclusion that this can't come from the brain?
I mean, quantum physics says there's like 7 dimensions. We're in the lowest one, isn't that? Oh, no. That's my mistake. So my studies could be wrong in this type.
Well, if your studies make the claim, or if the things that you've read make the claim that quantum physics shows that there's 7 dimensions, then yes, your studies are wrong.
So we have the 2D, the 3D dimension. We have 4D. I mean, don't you agree on those?
Yeah, our universe is 4-dimensional. There's 3 spatial dimensions and 1 time dimension.
Okay. Just like when you draw something on a paper, that's 2D, but then we have the 3D with 4D, 5D. Don't you
Nope.
see?
There's only, as far as we know, there are 4 dimensions. There's no 5th dimension.
Oh,
There's no evidence to support that.
they say like we have to acquire like 5D consciousness, whatever that means.
That's nonsense. No scientist would ever say that.
So, when you say the word God, you know the original meaning is Yahweh, right? Or translation.
Well, that's not like the original meaning. There were notions of gods before that.
Yeah, I'm talking in the Bible, sorry, specifically.
Sure.
So, what does Yahweh mean in English? It means I am.
It's a name. It doesn't have a meaning.
When you translate Yahweh from Hebrew to English, you get the word I am. That means pure consciousness.
It's not a word. That would be like saying the name Israel means, you know, what? It's like he who hears God or something. But no, it's just a name.
No, they all have translations in English and there are meanings. Like Jacob, like how...
Look, that would be like saying Jonathan has a meaning in English. But like it's just a name.
No, it has a Greek origins.
Sometimes words can become names, and then they no longer, when used as a name, they no longer mean the thing that they originally meant. That's what names are. Names refer to people, not like some definition. Like if I say hi, Jonathan, I don't mean hi, he who hears from God. Like that's not what I mean. I mean hi, this person.
But, yeah, you don't mean that, but that's what his name actually originates. Yeah, so. In the Bible, like Isaac, it means he who loves. I mean, Jacob means like...
You have to understand that that's a name, so it doesn't have a semantic meaning. It's just a name.
But that's in English, and Hebrew is older than English, so it wasn't a name before.
No, it literally was a name.
So you said Israel. Israel, when you translate it into English, you get God condensed. Or he who struggles with God. That's what Israel means.
That's what it is. I forgot. It wasn't he who hears God. It was he who struggles with God. Yeah, but now it's just a name. There are people whose name is Israel, and their name isn't he who struggles with God. It's Israel. It's just a name.
But the origins. We are looking at the origins. Where did the name originate from?
You can look from the you can look at the etymology of the. You can look at the etymology of a name, sure, if you want, but that's not relevant for the person who has that name.
When you say when you say Abraham, you say father of many nations. So
no, but that's not what you're saying. Yeah. That's not what you're saying. Like if I'm talking to Avraham Loeb, who's a physicist at Harvard, I'm not saying he who fathers many nations Loeb. I'm saying Avraham Loeb. Like that's just how names work.
Yeah, you're not meaning that, but that's what his name originates from. You don't have to.
Sure, it's irrelevant. I mean, that's irrelevant to the point.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Somebody called me. My mistake.
I can tell.
So you don't find those topics interesting, at least a bit?
Well, I find etymology very interesting, but I don't think it's relevant to the discussion at hand.
Yeah, I mean, like, how long have you been an atheist? Like 10 years?
Forever.
5 years?
The whole time, my entire conscious existence, I've been an atheist.
Whoa. That's cool. That's cool if you ask me. So, never considered any religion, any belief, any.
It's always seemed like nonsense.
Yeah, have you seen Adam's Creation from Leonardo da Vinci?
If it's the one that I think it is, then yeah.
Where Adam is touching.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, with the fingers and the...
I haven't seen it in person, but I've
seen
pictures.
God is portrayed in the brain. Yeah, God is drawn in a physical brain, and that's an illustration showing that God means I am, and it's like connection to us. It's not outside of us. So
okay. I mean, that's cool. That's cool artistry and it's cool imagery, but I don't know what that has to do with anything.
And when Jacob meets God face to face in a place called pineal, it's the pineal gland of the body, which every animal has a pineal gland. It's like a radio frequency device.
The pineal gland basically just controls some hormones like melatonin. It's not a radio frequency device.
I mean, you see animals like the snakes, the cats, the frogs, they use the pineal gland as like a radio frequency receiver. You can look that up. Every animal has that.
They literally don't.
And they use it like dolphins.
The pineal gland just like regulates melatonin and a few other hormones, if I remember correctly.
I mean, don't the sea creatures communicate using it?
No.
Oh, like only radio waves, or
No,
how did they
sea creatures
communicate?
don't use radio waves.
Oh, like maybe like ultrasound or
They
something
use
like that.
they use sound like we do.
Mm-hmm. So before I leave, you know Moses, like he kicks out the Israelites out of Egypt, he leads them out, and again, if we see in the perspective that everything in the Bible is about the human body, we see that Moses, by etymology, matches with osmosis. It's a process in the body where
That's
water moves from one
Moses is
membrane to another.
Moses is an
Yeah, yeah.
Egyptian name. Osmosis is an English word. They're not related.
Mhm. Just like good and evil and God and the devil, that's in English etymology
those
backing
are
up religion.
no, those are unrelated as well.
So what's the coincidence of good and evil and God is being good and the devil is being evil? Like there's no way you can justify the coincidence.
I don't have to justify anything. It's a coincidence. We can track the etymology of these
Because,
words.
yeah.
Like
Because
we can
other
just
atheists say,
like you should just look up the etymology of good. Etymology of good. Let's look. It comes from let's go to Etmo Online. So it comes from Old English god, meaning excellent, fine, valuable, desirable, favorable, blah 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 blah, which comes from Proto-Germanic goda, which means fitting or suitable, which comes from I guess from Proto-Indo-European gehed, to unite, to be associated, to be suitable. If we instead look up the etymology of God, the etymology dates back to gut, Proto-Indo-European, from guthon, from Proto-Germanic, meaning that which is invoked. So they're just completely unrelated words. They just they happen to sound the same, but they're unrelated.
Interesting, because many
Have
atheists
you looked?
say
Like
that
you could just look into this.
yeah.
Like this
But
information is freely available.
like top level atheists say that because there were so many religious people, they used the English language to
I don't care
put
what
their
they
beliefs
said. They're
in
wrong.
it. Yeah, gotcha.
Also, who says that? Like I've never heard an atheist say that ever.
I mean, Cyber Deconstruction Zone, Ian, Daniel.
I don't think that I don't know who Daniel is, but I know Cyber Deconstruction. I know Cyber Deconstruction. I know Deconstruction Zone. I know Ian, and as far as I'm aware, they've never said those things.
Maybe that's my. I mean, I've heard at least 3 times like, oh, that's because of religion is so, yeah.
Well, regardless of what anybody says, this information is freely available. You can just Google it. Where do these words come from? It's freely accessible. And you'll find that they're not related at all.
So, even when we see the human face, we see the name Yahweh written in our face. That's why the structure of our eyes is the same and the nose is under our eyes. I mean, everything matches up with the name.
What?
Even the name
about?
Yahweh equals 26 letters, and that's 206 bones of the human body. That's why God is in our image.
How is 206 and 26 related to each other?
Because if you add them together, you get 8. The 0 is
add
doesn't
what
matter.
together? Why are we working in base 10?
Sorry? Base 10?
Why are we working in base 10? Why aren't we working in base 16 or base 8 or base 2?
What do you mean base, sorry?
Why are you adding together the digits of a number?
That's called gematria, the study of numbers and relationship.
Yeah, and it's nonsense. It's nonsense because not everybody uses base 10. In fact, the ancient Babylonians used base 60, meaning that they didn't have 10 different digits, they had 60 different digits.
That's like Jewish mysticism. They use gematria all the time in Kabbalah, which is very ancient. And
gematria is basically like nonsense, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you find spiritual value in it, fine, but it doesn't say anything true about the world.
Even the DNA has the Yahweh name written in it.
Okay,
You've
where?
probably heard the argument.
Where?
So the DNA strand is held together by sulfur bridges, and they appear in the same pattern.
If there was sulfur in your DNA, then you'd die.
Sulfur bridges, not sulfur like the chemical.
Sulfur is an element, right? A sulfur bridge in our DNA would throw the physical structure of our DNA off entirely. Like there's no sulfur bridges in our DNA. It's like a made up thing by apologists. It's not like a real thing.
Have you looked that up? Just
Yep, I
because
did.
I'm gonna.
Yep.
Oh, okay. You saved me some time there. Okay. So again, doesn't matter about the sulfur. It's the pattern which is repeatable in
So then
every
why
living
wait?
being.
It doesn't matter about the sulfur.
I mean, because I haven't finished the point of the pattern, but
So then why'd you bring up the sulfur?
because that's what I've studied. Like the sulfur bridges appear in a repeating pattern.
Have you
but
actually read
said,
any science that said this, or did you just read from apologist websites?
I mean, couple sources which much, but
Which sources?
I mean different books on psychology and
Like which
science
ones?
and Dr. C.J. Young psychology and
Okay,
alchemy is one of them.
and Dr. C.J. Young, he talks about the sulfur bridges in DNA.
Yeah, specifically,
Okay.
yeah, that's one.
C.J. Young, what's the book?
Psychology and alchemy, I would say.
Okay. Is he?
You should.
Okay, so I found it. Psychology and alchemy. Wait, so is he a psychologist or is he like a biologist?
He's like advanced psychologist, I would say. Very
But
advanced.
is he a biologist? Otherwise, why should I trust him on what DNA is like?
Yeah, I got you. You shouldn't. Yeah. I don't know if he's a biologist actually. Only. Wait, I just googled it. There is sulfur bridges.
Not according to what I found. Can you show me or tell me what you found? What did you Google to find it?
Crystal structure sulfing binding domain SBD from DNA phosphorus dependent. Yeah, we got
Crystal structure of the
NIH
sulfur binding domain. Structural basis
Yeah.
for the recognition of sulfur and phosphorothioated DNA.
DNA.
What
Yeah,
is
exactly the same one.
Do you know what phosphorothioated DNA is?
No, too complicated.
Neither
no.
do I. Why do you think that this would say anything about our DNA? Because this
It
is...
says the sulfur atom, so it mentions the sulfur and the DNA together.
So where are the sulfur bridges?
Wait, you said there's no sulfur. You said
I said
that's
there's no
impossible.
sulfur bridges. I said that sulfur bridges would destabilize our DNA.
Okay, it says formed by two sulfur molecules, bonds
Okay.
made to achieve this
So what do
effect.
these
So
sulfur
it's like a
molecules
bond.
have to do? So what do these sulfur molecules have to do with God?
Yeah, the way you put it. So I didn't finish my point. The pattern we see that repeats in every human being, it's the numbers 10, 5, 6, 5. This pattern is a numerical value of Hebrew letters.
Let's see. Where is this actually cited? Let's see.
Yeah, if I
is
could
this,
just
is
finish,
this
it's
mentioned
like
anywhere up? Is this mentioned anywhere except on like Reddit?
Molecular
or something?
biology. No.
No.
Molecular
Like
biology.
I'm just looking for the actual claim, like where I can see where this is, you know, where evidence is given of this, because I've heard this claim before and nobody's ever given me evidence that this is the case.
Mm-hmm. Do you research using ChatGPT or you just use?
No,
like
I don't use
basic search
ChatGPT
engines?
because ChatGPT is not a reliable source.
You can click the search option and it's gonna provide actual science results, and that's plus on chat.
So you don't wait. So to be clear, you don't actually search. You just ask ChatGPT, right?
No. Just asking. I use many sources and combine.
Okay.
Let's see. Is that pattern true?
So-
Did you research it?
No, I'm not finding anything on it except from religious sites. So I don't think it's true.
So from compass.org, the sequence 10565 has been
Okay, let's
proposed
go
to correspondence.
compass.org. I'm not seeing anything about compass.org. What is compass.org?
I have to send you the link, but it's
Well,
about the DNA structure.
I typed it in.
from,
I typed it in, and I'm not finding anything.
But
So
that's the website. I have to give you the.
Did you go to the website, or did ChatGPT just tell you that?
No, I did it go. It's an electron microscope in 2012 in that website. It mentions the study.
Okay, so what's the website URL? Actually, let's just go to
Compass.
compass.org and let's see.
Compass.org,
Oh, wait.
God's name in your
So, hold on.
DNA.
Compass.org is a religious website. I'm asking for a scientific source.
Oh, it actually is a whoa, and it's an advanced one. Yeah, that's my mistake. So I should look into that and like come up with an actual observation so I can, yeah.
That'd be good.
Like one final thing. Yeah, I don't see to find so many information right now, but yeah,
I wonder
it says
why.
just a claim. It says it's just a claim for now.
Yep.
DNA consists of sequence without sulfur-based linkage forming. Okay. 10-5-6-5 pattern in nucleotide arrangement. Addition claims that was observed the DNA structures was advent of advanced imaging technologies. The first direct imaging of DNA using electron microscopy occurred in 2012, making earlier observations. In summary, there is no implicable science evidence to support this claim. Okay.
So why'd you say it?
Minus point. I mean, because I've seen it in so many like not studies, but books, and it's fascinating the connection. But
But
again,
the
I'm
books are
open
just
to.
literally making shit up.
Yeah, sometimes they are, but there's things you cannot deny.
Well, one of the things that you just told me, this 10-5-6-5 or whatever it was, I can deny because it was just fake. It was just fake news. You just made it up.
Fake news, yeah, you can say that, but I mean, I see you're passionate about researching as well as like me, but
What?
oh, nothing. I'm looking
Well,
for.
electric being, I'm gonna let you go because we've gone over a lot of different topics and there's a lot of people in the guest box.
Oh,
But thanks for being here. Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you,
It's
and see
okay.
you again next time.
Of course. Take care. And for everybody who's watching, make sure to like the live. If you like the live, then I'm more. If we get to 100K likes on TikTok, I'll put my hair down. Like I'll untie it and I'll put it down and it'll be glorious. Also, if you're watching on YouTube or on TikTok, make sure to like the live, make sure to follow along, make sure to consider subscribing. It's a cool thing to do. And if you extra like what you see, there's a Cash App in the link tree in my bio. There's a Cash App in the description of the YouTube video. So there's a buy me a coffee link if the Cash App doesn't work. All cool things to do. But of course not required. All right, let's bring up our next guest. Jay Mahunga, how's it going?
You said it correct. Good, man.
I would
How
hope
you?
so.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
doing all
pretty
right.
good.
So, what do you believe, and how are you going to convince me of it?
I'm a Christian. From
Okay.
a Christian perspective, yeah.
Oh shit! Somebody just donated 10 subs. What the fuck, Judas? Thank you. That's so delightful.
That's what's up.
Yeah, let's go. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, so atheist is just the believing in the absence of God, right?
Well, yeah, basically.
Yeah, that God doesn't exist. Now with that being said, how do you prove that God doesn't exist?
If you're asking for a deductive proof, I mean that depends on the God in question.
Yeah, based on the claim of the Bible, right? The explanation of the Bible, because that's what we have to use.
If that's the God you're referring to, then yeah, I mean I would point to things like the evidential problem of evil, which makes it unlikely that God is real. I would point to problems with, or I would point to inductive reasoning I have for thinking that minds only exist in bodies. I would point to inductive features of the world that causes seem, or that things that are caused seem to have physical causes. It seems like given the breadth of evidence that we have that God doesn't exist, it seems highly unlikely that he doesn't.
Do you think when people talks about the God of the Bible, is it just faith alone?
Well, some people believe on faith alone, and that I don't understand at all. Other people think that they have evidence for it.
Yeah. Now I want to, because I know your background is in physics, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to it. Now, from your understanding of physics and the claim of the creations of the Bible, what's your understanding of that?
Well, the Bible doesn't describe how our universe formed correctly, so
But do you agree with the order of the creations from the Bible? It says.
No, it's wrong.
So you don't think existence has space has to happen before existence?
God didn't create space in Genesis 1 or in Genesis at all.
Well, it says he created heaven and earth, right? So
he separated the waters to form heaven and earth, but the waters, the universe, the void already existed.
No, because it say in the beginning God created heaven and earth. That was the beginning of the book of Genesis.
Well, so
Before-
depends on how you read the first word Bereshit. Correctly interpreted, it should probably be in the beginning of creating the heavens and the earth, something like that.
Yeah, but see, it says heaven before earth, right? So existence, because I know science has to it's operate in space and times, right? So although
Mhm.
science is not limited neither to you or I, both of even people who have faith, we can both measure things, right?
So let me
together.
give you an example of how the order is wrong. It says that God created the earth before God created the sun, and that's incorrect. The earth formed after the sun formed.
Yes, because you're talking about day.
I think the sun
Day
was on day
4
4.
when he created the sun. But see, it answers that in the Bible where he talks about Jesus is the light of the world. So he's a source of a light. So before
Okay, but I'm talking about the sun. The sun,
Correct.
the earth already existed according to Genesis 1. The earth already existed when the sun was created, and that order is incorrect. In fact, in Genesis 1, it says that grass existed before the sun did.
Correct.
That's not
arguing-
true. So
I'm not arguing
Genesis
that. Right?
Genesis 1 is not a correct accounting of the origins of our universe.
So can I talk to you about dimensions? Like
You can, but I will probably just tell you that you're wrong because nobody seems to understand what dimensions are unless you've taken a math class.
I I did take dimension, but see from a if I want to create a video game, I'll put a video game, right? Because so I can explain what the higher dimensions are, right? If I create a video game, I have to create the space. I have to figure out what time I'm going to start, create the space before I create my game, the character and the rules of the game, right? So that space that I created is not necessarily share the same space that I'm at in my own creation. I'm in the higher dimensions, right?
Sure, you're not actually creating space to begin with. You're creating data.
Does that consider space data?
No, I mean, like when you create a
'Cause-
game, you're not literally creating space. You're just creating a data points, right? You're just arranging data in a particular way.
Uh-huh. That is interesting. Well, I don't have much to say, to be honest.
Okay.
So I just kind of have what your explanation of that, which is great explanation, anyways. But yeah,
Okay.
so I should hop down so you can have someone else. But
Sounds
thank you
good,
for having
Jay.
me.
Thanks for being here.
Yep.
All right, let's bring up the next guest. Let's bring up Jacob. Hey, Jacob. Jacob, how's it going?
Hello, Blitz. So I'm gonna do this a little differently. If that's chill with you. I've been watching your content for years now, and I really like it.
I
I
appreciate
really
it.
like how you bring what are typically very academically complex concepts and narrow it down, but still keep the amount of information.
All right,
so
you're
that
gonna
people-
make me blush, and also flattery will get you nowhere. So why don't you
I
tell
know.
me what you believe?
So here's the one thing. So First, I consider myself agnostic, not atheist, just because I haven't been presented. I'm sure it exists, but I personally haven't been presented with evidence to make me fully deny the existence of a creator.
Well, so
So I
let me
was
ask you
wondering,
this: what is your view? If you had to put a percentage on it, how sure are you that there is a God, or that there isn't a God?
a god in what sense? Like, as in a deity that
As in,
controls the world?
as in a being that is responsible for creating and or sustaining physical reality as we know it. Perhaps it intervenes in the world, perhaps it doesn't.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't intervene in the world. 50-50 on creation, though.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
So, is there any evidence completely disproving that, or?
Well, it depends on which notion of God you're referring to. I mean, like, for me, there's inductive reasoning, namely that we kind of have this, like all the experience that we ever have with minds are attached to bodies, right? All of the minds that, I've ever seen and I've ever interacted with are attached to bodies. And all of the physical things that have causes, they've always had physical causes. So it just seems very, 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 like, my priors are that, well, minds have physical bodies, and physical effects have physical causes. That just doesn't leave room for a mind, for a bodiless mind that causes physical effects with non-physical causes.
Oh no, I agree with that completely. I think one example could be consciousness in general. Okay, I can't. Sometimes I stutter. I'm sorry. But for example, right, like trying to think of what happened before you were in a physical body, it's impossible. But you can be unconscious and still have your mind think. Unconscious in the physical sense. You know what I mean, right? Like sleeping, for example, right? Your brain is still working. It's still a thing, and you're in your body. Like I don't know how to put it into words, but I agree with what you're saying.
Well, I mean, that's one of the, like those kind of two observations are like critical for
Yes.
my atheism, because like look, like we have very, very strong priors that like physical things have physical causes, that minds always come attached to bodies, and the reason why we think minds always come attached to bodies is because when you mess with the body, the mind changes, right? When you mess with like the
Yes.
brain, the mind gets like the mind definitely changes, and so there's easily
Yes.
some like we should have strong inductive belief that the mind is in some sense caused by the body, because when you change the body, the mind changes. But look,
Okay.
Jacob, since we don't really have any major points of disagreement, I am going to let you go. But thanks for being here, bud.
Okay. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too.
I love when people think that the Big Bang is two atoms smashing into each other. Like, that's hilarious to me. Like, that is arguably like the funniest thing that a theist can tell me. Like, it is so funny. Daniel, how's it going?
What's up, man? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. What do you believe, and how are you going to convince me of it?
I believe in Christianity.
Okay, and why should I believe that?
Well, there are a lot of points. I say, how the universe works, my personal reasons, and then historical evidence towards it.
Well, so let me ask you this. If you had to try to convince somebody that your belief is true, which one would you start with?
Yeah. Probably the first one on how the universe works.
Okay, yeah, sure. So what about the universe working?
So, the universe has obviously a lot of laws, a lot of complex laws, and a lot of specific laws that if you change them ever so slightly, the universe wouldn't even begin. So I'd start it from there, and then secondly, when I look around me, it's just so complex on how everything just works. Just not only the universe, but also us humans and animals, and just around me. It's so complex I can't even explain it. You get how I mean?
I mean, I understand that, yeah, the universe is complex. I don't understand how that means that it has a creator.
Well, when I look at it, it's like this because scientists have come out and discovered that the highest possibility of the universe it is a high possibility of the universe having a definite beginning, as in
How
the
do you figure?
universe. What do you mean?
Well, like which
Like
scientists
the
are which
universe
scientists
has
are you
a.
referring to? And how did they figure out that it definitely has a begin, or that it has a high probability of having a beginning?
Well, I'm looking at the Stephen Hawking.
Okay, well, Stephen Hawking also didn't believe that God caused the universe.
Yeah, I know. But what does that matter?
So Stephen Hawking's view that the universe had a beginning is mutually incompatible with your view that God exists. Because the beginning of the universe that Stephen Hawking gave was uncaused, meaning that
Well,
God
sure.
didn't cause it.
But still, he points towards there being a beginning.
Yeah, he thought that. I disagree with him.
Why do you disagree with him?
Because I think that there's I think that first the model that he put forward as the beginning, kind of the beginning of the universe, which is now known as the Hartle-Hawking model, has some flaws. It doesn't actually map onto our reality. Our reality didn't evolve from a de Sitter state, and that's what's required for the Hartle-Hawking universe. Second, I think that there's good reason to think that our universe is eternal. I mean, essentially, the natural outcome of things like string theory and loop quantum gravity, which are best theories of quantum gravity, which point towards, how the universe exists or how the universe functions, inevitably have some sort of eternal universe. They don't have some causeless universe or some finite universe in the past.
Right, but then I think about something like energy, which we know cannot be created nor destroyed. Only.
So then, how did God create it?
Why wouldn't he be able to create it? He's the creator of all things. He's Almighty God.
Hold on. You just said that it can't be created or destroyed, but then you just said it was created.
Right, because energy is confined within our universal
so
laws,
can it be
universe
created?
bounds.
Wait, so can
Well,
it be created?
Okay,
so it can be created under your worldview. So why should I accept the view that energy can't be created or destroyed?
Well, because how our universe works, is not able to be created. However,
I mean, that's not
God
true, though.
God can define the universe. I mean, he's a creator of it. He's not defined by the universe laws.
I mean, fortunately, that's not a law of our universe. Fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on how you feel.
What, that energy can be created or destroyed?
Yeah, it's not a law.
Whatever. If it's a law, it's not a law. It's just how the universe works.
Well, no, it's not. Our universe has an increasing amount of energy every day.
From what?
Dark energy.
And where does that come from?
It doesn't come from anywhere. It's new energy.
So wait, so nothing turns into something.
No, it's not. Nothing isn't turning into anything. It's just energy is not conserved. There's just new energy. Like there's more energy today than there was yesterday.
But where is that coming from?
It's not coming from anywhere. Energy isn't a substance.
So how is it being created?
Energy isn't a substance. It's just a number. And that number is higher today than it was yesterday.
But energy isn't just a number. Energy.
It is just a number.
Things.
No, energy can't do anything. Things do things.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. If we're talking of numbers, do you think that we created math or that we discovered math?
I think we created it.
You think we created it? Okay. Well, why do you think we created it?
Because it's literally my day job to do that.
All right.
Like it's like part of my job description is mathematician, right?
Right. Okay.
And that's my day job. We create numbers, or not. We don't create numbers. We create math.
Right. So I don't remember the name of it, but it was this thing that like if you zoomed into it, it would just go for infinity. What was that called?
You're talking about the Mandelbrot set.
I'm pretty sure I am. Yeah. So if we created math, how did that come forth?
We created it. Like we created the formula that describes it, and then all of the infinite zooming feature, that just all comes from the formula.
Right, but how did we humans create something that led to that?
Why is that impossible?
Well, I mean,
Like
thinking about
somebody
it, we
wrote down the
humans,
formula, and one of the features of that formula is it has this, you can zoom in forever feature.
right? So how do we humans go from, that this complex, obviously math is very complex, but if we created it, how can we then create it to be infinite?
It's not infinite. It contains a finite amount of information.
Well, I mean, you can zoom in and it goes on for
So-
infinity, so.
So Daniel, if you do 1 divided by 3, you get 0.00, or you get 0.333 repeating, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it has an infinite amount of information. Even though you can zoom in to the number 1/3 as much as you want, you can extend the decimals out infinitely. That doesn't mean that there's an infinite amount of information there. It's just the number is 1/3. It's a finite amount of information, and the same is true about the Mandelbrot set.
All right, I get your point. But then there's also pi, number of pi.
Pi is again a finite amount of information. It is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. It doesn't take very much information to specify.
All right.
So
Should we
if you think that,
go into some other points?
I mean, it just sounds like your justifications for why you, if that was your most convincing justification for why you believe in God, why do you believe in God? If
well, I
you're,
wouldn't say it was my most convincing, but it
well, I
definitely was a
asked you
part
to
of it.
bring up the thing that would be most likely to convince somebody.
All right.
So is there something that's more likely to convince somebody that you have?
Well, maybe the historical evidence pointing towards God.
What historical evidence?
Historical evidence, like, for example, Jesus Christ.
What historical evidence of what? That like there was a dude?
That God came into human form of Jesus
Oh.
Christ.
Where's the historical evidence of that?
Well, we have the Gospels, and then we also have many sources that came within the first century.
So the evidence, so the evidence you pointed to the Gospels as evidence, which
Yeah.
I'm not going to accept as true. And what
Why
were the
not?
other sources that? Why not? Well, because they make extraordinary claims without really providing extraordinary evidence.
What extraordinary evidence would you want?
I mean, like archaeological evidence would be cool, or maybe.
I mean, there's plenty of archaeological evidence in the Bible that's been pointed to be true.
Sorry,
and
there's
also from
archaeological
Jesus'
evidence
time.
there's archaeological evidence that Jesus was God.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the evidence?
Well, I mean, when we look at the Gospels, it claims that Jesus was God. There's a lot
That's
of
not
things in the
archaeological
Gospel.
evidence.
Well, can you let me finish,
Sure.
please? So a lot of archaeologists, they go to the place where Jesus supposedly has been. They look
Mhm.
at the places. It is in fact true from what the gospel says. And not only that, but throughout the Bible, it's the same thing. They've even used the Bible to make these archaeological, finds, not just from the Gospels, but from earlier than that.
So
But
let me
let's
ask you
get
this,
into
Daniel.
All right.
So have you read Harry Potter?
I've read Harry Potter.
Okay, so in Harry Potter, you remember at the very beginning when in the first book, when Harry
Yeah.
Potter has to go to King's Cross Station in order to go to platform 9 3/4 to get to Hogwarts?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I go and I read Harry Potter, the Sorcerer's Stone, and I
Right.
say, well, I wonder, this King's Cross Station thing, is it real? And then I go to London and I check that King's Cross Station is a real place. Would that be evidence that Harry Potter is actually a wizard?
Well, no, because Harry Potter is a fictional book.
So then
And
when
J.K.
you
Rowling
say,
has claimed that the book is a fictional book.
okay, so if 1,000 years from now we all forget that it was a fictional book, would that give evidence that it's true?
No, because the writing of Harry Potter doesn't show it being factual. I mean, we
Wait,
can clearly tell.
so what are the
a boy-
factual claims in the Bible?
Some factual claims, well, that they were humans. It was written
Harry
not
Potter
in
was
a
a
way.
human.
Can you let me finish?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So how it was written, it's not written as a once upon a time story. It is written on eyewitnesses and what they saw.
Just to be clear, Genesis literally starts with "in the beginning."
Yeah, but I'm talking about the Gospels.
Oh, okay.
I didn't mention Genesis.
Well, I mean, I thought we were talking about the Bible, right?
Well, I mentioned Bible as in archaeological evidence, but then we spoke into, you talking about Harry Potter being,
So,
a
by
book
the
we should
way,
genuinely consider.
what's the first line of Mark? What's the first line of Mark?
I don't know.
The
I'm sorry for
beginning.
not knowing that. But
It's the
the
beginning
beginning.
of the gospel. Like that's
and
it's like
what are the words after that?
the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Those are the first lines.
That's the first line.
gospel.
Those are the first words of the gospel of Mark.
Yes, the beginning of the gospel. Yeah. So what?
My point
what's
is
have anything to do
that
with
sounds like a in the beginning, like a fairy tale does.
No, it just indicates that it's the first gospel. It's the first book of the gospel. I mean, are you sure that's Matthew chapter 1 verse 1?
It's Mark. Yeah, that's Mark.
All right.
Like, I mean, why should I believe the Bible any more than I should believe, like, I don't know, the Bhagavad Gita or the Epic of Gilgamesh?
Right, that's a really good point. Because I'm pretty sure the Bhagavad Gita is older than the Bible, right?
Much older, yeah.
Yeah, much older. The thing is that it's not as reliant as the gospel. What do I mean by that? Well, the Bhagavad Gita, I am pretty sure, I mean, from what I know, it's not historically as reliable as the gospel is.
In what way is the gospel historically accurate other than it names real places?
Well, it also names real people that lived at the time.
It names a few. It names a few, but again,
it names a lot, actually. I mean, Pontius Pilate is being named.
Well, that's
sure,
one person. There's like maybe
sure
half a dozen real people that are named.
I'm pretty sure there's a accounting of Pontius Pilate speaking or writing of Jesus
there might be
Christ.
there might be like half a dozen people, like real people that were named.
Well, I mean, we have the apostles as well.
We don't know that they were real people. We don't have any evidence that they actually existed outside of the Bible. Now, I'm willing to grant that they probably existed.
How do we
in one
not?
form or
I mean,
another.
they spread out the word throughout
that's the
countries.
claim. That's the claim. We don't know. Paul
Well, I
probably
mean, we
was
have
real.
evidence that they were there. People
Paul probably was
clearly
real.
wrote down that. What?
Paul probably was real.
What about the other apostles? I mean, it was written down that they came when they went to other countries. They wrote down that the apostles came to them.
Sure.
I mean, for example, my home country, Armenia, two of the apostles came to Armenia, and there are a lot of writings that they came there. There's a lot of evidence that they went there. It's not just a random claim they made.
So let's say that that's true. Okay, so it mentions some real people. If I find a book that mentions real people in it, does that mean that it's real?
Well, no, but that's not the point. These people are claiming to have seen the living version of God. It's not just some random stuff that happens on every day. Yeah, it's a very big claim. And if you read the gospel, believing in that claim is the difference between life and death. So those are some very serious claims.
Yeah, they are
Very
serious claims. Why should I believe them?
Well, I've told you a lot of evidence pointing towards it, but I'll tell you another thing.
Well, the evidence you've told me is just that, like, oh, it mentions real people in real places. Like, that's not evidence that, like, Jesus is God, right? That's not evidence of the extraordinary claims.
Well, no, because these people have claimed stuff to be true. These people have claimed that Jesus was God.
Yes, they do. Of course they claim stuff to be
yeah.
true. People claim stuff to be true all the time. Why does that mean that it's true?
Well, because, I mean, there's just so many people that have seen Jesus risen from the dead.
Okay, and
it's not just 12.
Hold on, who saw who were they?
Well, there were the 12 apostles, but the Bible says it was over 500. Now, they don't name these 500 people.
So why should I believe that there were 500 people who saw?
Well, I don't know, believe it or do not believe it. I mean,
Well, you're
if
the
you're
one trying
gonna,
to convince me, right?
well, I mean, if you're gonna come and tell me that I will give you a name of all the 500s, I don't have it because they didn't have
So are they reliable
writings of
witnesses?
everybody back then.
So
What?
are they
Lying about
reliable
witnesses?
witnesses? Are they reliable witnesses? If you don't even know
Well,
who they
I
are.
well, I never claimed the 500 to be reliable.
Okay,
You told me.
who are reliable?
Well, I said the 12 apostles.
Okay, so the 12 apostles. So how do we know that they're reliable witnesses about Jesus' resurrection?
Well, one of the first point I like to make is, do you know how they died?
I don't think you do.
I know how they died.
All 12 of them?
Not from the top of my head, but I could probably look up.
Well,
I know they died very brutal
which ones of
deaths.
those are actually which ones do you actually have evidence for, do you think?
What do you mean evidence? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
like these deaths came from out of the blue. Of course, there's evidence pointing towards them.
Well, the question is how do you know how they died? What's
Well,
the
because
source?
the evidence is pointing towards them.
Like
Do you want me
what's
to
what's
give
the
you
evidence?
all the sources of it?
Yeah, give me
All of
one.
the sources.
How about actually how about give me 3? Or maybe even
3
one if you have
sources.
them. Well, yeah, 3 sources for three different apostles.
I can absolutely look it up right now.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Hippity hoppity. True. True. By the way, y'all, if you like what you're seeing, consider supporting the live. There's a bunch of cool ways to do it. You can follow the live, you can like the live, you can join the Discord. There's a Cash App in the link tree in my bio. There is a Cash App in the description of the YouTube video. There's a buy me a coffee if the Cash App link doesn't work. Also, you can subscribe on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of ways to support me if that's the thing that you care to do. You don't have to, but you can. Most importantly, though, and this is for everybody who's watching on TikTok anyway, most importantly, like the live. If we get to 100K, I'll put my hair down. Your friendly evangelical astrophysicist here. Overland Adventurer. I'll bring you up after. I have somebody waiting. I have somebody who's been waiting for a good while who's in the YouTube queue. So I'm going to bring them on next, and then I'll bring you up, Overland, okay? Overland. How about glasses off? I can't see anything with my glasses off, so. I mean, I'm just humming, bro. It's not stimming. People hum sometimes. We're just waiting for him. Yeah, I think it's from The Hobbit. I can never remember. It's from, it's one of these like dwarf songs. Yeah, it's Misty Mountains. Misty Mountain, yeah. As lead engineer of the Burj Khalifa, the Earth is flat. True. True. C-Bar? Why would you say that? That's so rude. Oh, he left. Okay, well, I'm gonna bring on the guest from YouTube. Sorry to keep you waiting, John. John, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
John,
Can you hear me
you
all
can?
right?
Yeah, I can. Great. Okay, let me just get you
Awesome.
set up on so then everybody else can hear you, and then why don't you give me a mic test, will you?
Okay.
Okay, it seems like you're good there.
Awesome.
Your video is not visible, so if you want to turn it off, you can. It's not going to help either way.
Okay.
Just going to put your name up so then everybody knows who's speaking. All right, what you got for me, John?
Okay, so I want to state that I'm a Nicene Christian, and I want to talk to you about natural law and Pascal's wager. What are
Sure.
your
Okay.
thoughts on Pascal's wager?
I think that
If you don't know what it is, I can explain it.
I'm familiar. I think that Pascal's wager is like good if you've never thought about anything before. Otherwise, atrocious. Like atrociously bad, I should say, as far as like the argument goes.
I think the major flaw of the argument is the fact it's more fear-based than the fact it's love-based.
Well, no, I mean the fact is that it dies to parity arguments, right? Like if I just say, well, suppose that there's a god named Atheismo who only sends atheists to heaven. Well, now what do you do?
It's not a convention of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's more of a convention of just God in general.
I know.
But I bring that up because,
Suppose there exists a god that only sends atheists to heaven.
Okay, what does that have to do with the argument?
So then you would benefit the most by not believing.
Well, that's true, but that doesn't have to do with the argument. The main point of Pascal's wager is that reasonably speaking, logically speaking, there is a God. Now, of course, the guy who uses it is Christian, but it would be more rational to believe a God simply because if you believe in a God, then you can have that understanding of both relationship and the understanding of who God is.
Wait, so are you? Hold on. To be clear, are you using?
Law.
To be clear, are you using Pascal's wager in the sense that like it is more rational to believe in God, even if such a God doesn't exist, because then you have a better chance of going to heaven?
No, I'm using it in the sense of it's better to have an understanding of God, so you know, and the understanding. And this is why I brought it up in the first place. Is it's about natural law. So what are your
Pascal's
thoughts
wager is about you know, the probability of going to heaven, right? If you have some alternative version, I'd love to hear it, but I'm not familiar with it otherwise.
According to the Handbook of Christian Apologetics by Peter Criff and Ronald K. Tunnock, it states that let's see. Suppose the reader. Well, I'm not gonna read all of that. Gosh, there's a lot to read. You sure you want to hear all this? And I'll just read
just summarize
it.
it for me.
As proposed, Pascal's wager is assuming the logical reasoning itself cannot decide for or against the existence of God. It seems to be a good reason on both sides. Now, since reason cannot decide for sure, somehow, and since the question is more important to decide somehow, then we must wager we cannot prove. And so we are asked, where are you going to place your bets? It's not that it's a understanding of, hey, I believe in the Christian God or this God, but more of an understanding of at least it's more reasonable and logical to believe in God because you have to have an understanding that someday you will face death. Which again, my issue with it is that it's fear-based. Now, the reason why I bring up Pascal's wager is because I want to bring up the understanding of natural law, which is what I've been trying to get to.
Okay, we can talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm bringing up as a basis for the argument. What are your thoughts on natural law, like Thomas Aquinas, C.S. Lewis, even Aristotle's per se understanding of it?
Yeah, I think that we should talk to scientists rather than theologians as far as natural law is concerned.
Well, it's not that it's a theological issue; it's more of a moral issue because you would agree with me that
we're referring to natural law, right? Like we're referring to like the law of gravitation, for example.
No. I'm talking about when I speak of natural law, I speak of natural law as in the natural law of moral law. For example, you would agree with me that throughout all culture, throughout all time, there seems to be a common moral law. Like, hey, maybe don't
so.
like, you know, go and murder your friend. Well, well, why don't you think it's true?
Well, I mean, because like prior to, you know, 250 years ago, there were laws that, you know, enabled and protected slavery, and now we have something that
I see your point, but what was the main cause that got rid of slavery globally?
Generally Enlightenment era thinking.
No. Who forefronted the understanding of getting rid of slavery?
Rationalists?
Rationalists, yes, but who else? Who were the first people?
Slaves? Like,
no.
Obviously slaves. Obviously slaves were the first people who were trying to push for abolition of slavery, right?
Oh no, I agree. But at the same time, the only cultural time you see slavery getting rid of is in China. And before European colonialism, after European colonialism, it was actually the Christian moral system that helped set up a foundation to get rid of slavery.
It was also a Christian moral system that enshrined slavery. So it seems like it's a wash.
I totally agree. And I agree with that. But at the same time, we take people like John Brown. We take people like, who else can we think of? Who's the guy that also led the women's abolitionist women's voting rights movement? I forget his name. But you take people like that. You take the understanding that it was seen as a moral wrong, even by, I think it was Pope want to say Pope. No, it wasn't Pope Pius.
It was also
I'm
seen
getting
as
my
a
names
moral right
mixed
by
up.
others. So like it seems like it's a
Yes,
wash.
you're right.
Wash. So
But
the
my
point
main
is
point
that
I'm
there were.
making.
Well, I mean, so I brought up slavery as an example of clearly there is no
Yes.
like well-defined natural law universally throughout all of time because slavery was considered totally normal and totally natural as far as the natural law goes for most of human history, and now we view it as an abomination. So like this is clearly
Well,
not like some
I'm
God-given thing.
I'm also bringing up natural law because I'm bringing up things like murder. I'm bringing up things
Okay, well,
like
why aren't you bringing up things
treating
like
how you
slavery?
treat your neighbor. Because, as you mentioned, slavery has been accepted globally through all cultures, but at the same time, slavery in our modern age, as we have become more, as you say, rationalistic, or if you have put it, the rationalist, the Enlightenment movement has gotten rid of it, also is based on the point that the value system that you are living in, the fumes of the value system would be a one of what?
The Enlightenment. That's where it
No.
comes from generally. Yeah.
But where, okay, you keep bringing up the Enlightenment, but where did the Enlightenment have its roots? It stems from,
Greek
as in the
philosophy
understanding. Yes, and
stems from the
who
classics.
preserved Greek philosophy?
The Arabs.
No.
Yeah, the Arabs preserved it in the golden.
I know you're gonna say the Baghouse Data of Wisdom, but that was burned down by the Mongols, so I disagree there.
Well, no, I mean,
But I would
the
say-
reason why the Europeans were able to gain access to the ancient Greek philosophies and the ancient Roman philosophies was because the Arabs preserved it.
And because of the Eastern Greeks, the Eastern Romans, Constantinople. A lot of them migrated to Italy.
Constantinople.
But that's besides the point.
I mean, yeah, perhaps, but like, I mean, the point is that like
1453.
Sure, I mean,
that
all happened after the Arabs found the Greek philosophy, right?
Well, the Arabs also they also got rid of a lot of the Greek philosophy in the sense of their conquest, but that's a whole nother topic. The main topic I'm hitting on is that you would agree with me that there is a common natural understanding. Like, for example, you're going to say it's wrong.
No.
Hey, don't go and rape somebody. Don't go and murder somebody. That's wrong, right?
Those agree with my moral intuitions, absolutely, and I think that there are probably some like very like kind of pre-moral, like almost instinctual responses that humans have, but those are not that is not enough to build up an entire morality, right?
No. But you would say that there is a common causation throughout nature as a whole, that being the nature that we live in, the trees, everything, blah, 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 whatever you want to say, that there is an understanding of doing what is right.
No, also, trees don't do what is right. What?
No.
Humans have a sense. But
yes, but in the sense of that humans are the ones that understand the morality. But I'm using trees as the understanding of nature because I think of nature, I think of trees. That's a whole nother thing.
Just one sec. Sorry, John. Just one sec. There are some donations that I just want to. Otherwise, I'll forget. So Semper EQ, thank you for the $5 on YouTube. I appreciate you. And my real life human brother, he's currently being repaired. And Charlie with the $6.66. I appreciate you a lot. Anyway, continue.
I also want to bring up the argument for beauty and the argument for love.
Okay, so we're moving off of natural law?
No. This ties into natural law. All this is tying together.
Okay.
So what do you think of the argument for beauty? You would say
I think
something so beautiful that.
Are you just talking about like aesthetic preference?
I'm talking about the argument from aesthetic experience.
I think that
I'll give you an example.
Seeing aesthetic. Go ahead.
There is the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. Therefore, there must be a God. You either see this one or you don't.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Well, it's an argument for beauty that, logically speaking, that the way things are made, the way things are put together, that there must be something rather than nothing.
Can you frame the argument as a syllogism, please? It would just help me understand what you're trying to get at.
Okay. Well, let's say you found a woman very beautiful. Maybe it's your girlfriend, wife. I don't know if you have one. Let's say you found her very beautiful, right? You would say that beauty comes from what? Just a mere biological, chemical compound within you, or is it something deeper?
It would come from aesthetic. It would come from, well, I mean, it's a little bit reductive to say it's just chemicals, but I would say that it comes from psychological preferences, and those psychological preferences are rooted in biochemistry.
Would you say that the beauty or love is just purely biological and understanding and nature and essence?
Yes.
So then you truly love the person because love and beauty are then subjective.
Well, obviously, love and beauty are subjective.
Well, beauty, I would say, is subjective.
Love and beauty are obviously
subjective?
Obviously, it's a feeling.
Would you say that love is a feeling?
Obviously,
wait a
yeah,
minute.
that's what love is. What?
But if love is a feeling, and I'm going to give you a very Christian example. If love is a feeling, then why does it say God for so loved the world, and then He died on the cross, and it says that it was the joy set before Him when He was crucified?
Look, I don't.
Did you say that's love? Was that a feeling?
I would say that. I don't think that that's like a true thing that happened. But supposing for a moment that it was. then yeah,
Okay.
that would mean that Jesus felt such love for humanity that he was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Notably, he felt such love.
So he felt such love for you,
Well, yeah,
logically
or for
speaking.
humanity. At least
If
that's the
that
claim. I don't
supposedly
actually.
happened.
Yeah, I don't think it happened. But yeah, if that happened, then it was a feeling, right?
How do you know it was a feeling? How
That's
do you
that's
know
just
he didn't make the action, the choice? You think love is a feeling and not a choice, correct?
yeah. Love is obviously it's an emotion. It's a feeling.
But is it a choice too? For example, I don't feel like loving my girlfriend, but am I gonna do it?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean by you don't feel like loving somebody. Like
Sometimes you just don't want to love someone, but you make the choice to do it, correct?
Are you like equivocating love as like being like generous towards that person?
No.
Because
No.
like
Let me
the
define
feeling
love
that
with the Greek.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
So there are multiple kinds of love in the Bible, correct? You have eros, you have agape,
Sure.
you
Which
have
one are you referring to?
Philadelphia. I am referring to more specifically in the agape, but I'm tying it into eros because agape and eros are very closely connected in Scripture.
All right, let's.
Now, the reason
So
why
this
I
is
use this argument is because I'm using it in the understanding of what is love. Because you cannot define
baby,
love as
don't
a purely
hurt me.
chemical compound or
Don't hurt me.
as a purely psychological compound. There must be something deeper within love. And I
Why?
believe even if you're
Why should I believe that?
well, why wouldn't you?
Well, because my
Doesn't it
experience with
seem
love
kind
is
of
that
hopeless?
my experience with love is that it's precisely a feeling. It's a very, very
So
strong
it's not
feeling.
a choice.
Well, I'm a determinist, so yeah.
So let's say you just lost the feelings. Then what?
Then you break up with your person if you want to.
Doesn't that just seem kind of like hopeless and bland? Like, isn't love supposed to be this lifelong bond? An older couple sitting in the park, a
It's
young
not
couple
love.
cuddling in a garden. I mean,
So, John, are you in like a long-term relationship? Have you been in one before?
I have had one girlfriend in the past.
Did you love her?
Oh yes, of course, but it was not a
And
feeling. It was a
so
choice.
why don't you love her anymore? Or maybe you still do.
Well, not the
I
most
mean, well,
emotionally
okay.
healthy person.
You
She's
don't
a
have to
great
you don't have to
person.
explain to me. You don't have to explain to me.
Great person.
I don't want to pry. My point is obviously not love doesn't have to be lifelong, right? Like sometimes the feelings aren't there anymore.
Well, the main point that I'm making is that love is a choice, not a feeling.
I don't
think
even know what
Jesus
that
just
means.
felt. Well, I don't think Jesus just felt whenever he was being crucified. I think he made the choice to do it. Like when he was in the
he
Garden
felt
of
love.
Gethsemane.
So let's say
Yes.
that this is true. He felt love, and because of
Yes.
that love, he chose to take an action. But
Well,
those
no,
that
he didn't
doesn't
just
mean he
feel it.
chose love.
He didn't just feel it. He made the action do it. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, what was he doing in the garden?
I don't know. You'd have to tell me.
He was praying, and he prayed so much he started sweating blood.
Ew.
I mean, this man was in prayer, like for real. And he was telling his Father in heaven, the Father, the Trinity, which is a whole other argument, which we won't get into. But he was telling his Father, if I don't want this cup, take it from me. He was feeling pain. He didn't want to do it, but he had to because he cared. You know, like when you're in the military.
Yeah, and caring is a feeling.
Well, it's not just a feeling, it's a choice. You can care for someone without feeling. You can care for them because it's just what you should do as a human.
No, caring is like, maybe we're just talking past each other, but when I hear that somebody cares about something or cares about someone or loves someone, the way that I understand, please, the way that I understand that to mean is that they have a certain feeling. That's how I understand that phrase to mean. Sorry, one more time.
Do you care about the orphans or the poor or the needy?
Sometimes.
So you say it's just a feeling?
Yeah.
And not a choice, morality speaking?
No, I don't think it's a choice.
I think it's a choice. Because I make the choice to care for people.
I know you do, but I don't know why I would.
So I guess the main, and by the way, I'm loving this, by the way, I'm having so much fun. The main point that
I'm glad. No, I appreciate you too. You're a good interlocutor. I appreciate it.
The main point I'm making is that there is something that Nicene Christianity has that no other religion, no other belief system has.
Why do you think so?
And that is I'm about to explain it. That is a unequivocal love.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase, there's no love like Christian hate, right?
Yes. Do you know where that phrase came from?
No, I don't know who originally said it, but it is kind of poignant.
It came from the homosexual movement. And I think that it's
pretty
because
poignant,
a lot of
isn't it?
Christians struggle to love homosexuals, even though it is wrong, and that we are called to love them. And can I share something personal with you? Is it okay?
I suppose, yeah, you can, as long as it doesn't get me banned.
No, you don't want to get banned. I had a really rough experience with a church.
I okay.
I got shunned by a church, and I'm not going to name the church, but I got shunned by this church, and I was treated like crap and garbage. And during all that, my mom was Christian, my dad was an atheist, and so I had to make the choice to what I believe in. And so I made the choice to say, despite what this church did, looking at who Christ said he is as a God of love, as a God who was beat and was crucified and loved me for who I am, truly there must be something here. And so I came to this understanding within both nature and both this understanding of when I look at history, especially when I look at history, that there is a God. And I see a lot of brokenness in humanity. I mean, you look at history, there's just brokenness after brokenness after brokenness. It's a terrible thing. But I said, wait a minute, these Christians, they were persecuted for 300 years and they didn't fight back or revolt or do all this. You know what they did? They loved those who hurt them. They forgave their enemies. I look at the early church fathers and I'm just astounded by it. I mean, what kind of religion does that? Not even Islam. Islam, conquest under Muhammad. Buddhism, don't get me wrong, Buddha has some good teaching, but what he teaches is just not true. Buddha, he had some
Wait,
great teaching.
why do you
his
think that what he
doctrines.
teaches is just not true?
Well, if you actually read what Buddha said, he said, "Follow my doctrines, not me." Whereas Jesus said, "Follow me."
Yeah.
Now,
So why
that's
why
a
is
whole
that not
nother
true?
debate. Well, that's a whole nother debate. I don't feel like getting into it. But the
Okay.
main
Well,
thing
you
that
can't
I'm
you can't just say it's just not true and then move on,
well,
right?
I mean, I just did.
Okay.
The
Well,
main
so
thing that I'm
I
the
mean,
main
like
point that I'm making is
it.
love.
Yeah. So what's your response to there's no love like Christian hate then? Because clearly,
Well, I
like one
just
of the
responded to it.
your response was like, oh, it originated with the homosexuals, and then you gave a story about your own life. But
Yes.
that doesn't say
Yes.
anything about how hateful Christians can be.
They can be hateful. But what does
In
it say?
fact,
What does it
one of
say
the
about
major
love in the Bible?
one of the major sources, like probably the biggest source of hate in the United States right now, I can't really comment on other places, is Christianity, right?
Okay, well, what does it say about love in the Bible? What does it
Probably
say
a
about
lot of
people not
things.
loving?
Probably a lot of
Exactly.
things.
It says faith worketh by love. Now, when
So are you just
Christians
saying that they're
don't have
not real
love,
Christians?
no, I'm saying I can't judge someone else's salvation. What I'm saying is that when Christians don't love, they're breaking the greatest commandment, which is in
Okay.
Matthew 28:38, I
So, but
believe. Love
I
the
mean,
Lord
like,
God of all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself.
that's great. That's great. But look, when there's such a prevalence of hatred in a community, I think it's more
Would you say
realistic.
that the homosexual
Please
community
hold
also
on.
has done
I was in the middle of a
things-
sentence.
Sorry,
I was in the middle of a sentence.
I apologize.
I would say that it's more accurate to judge a community by what they do rather than what they say.
So, on that note, actually, I'm going to take this somewhere else. On that note, what has Christianity done for the world?
It's done a lot of good and a lot of bad.
Name the bad, because I know the history here.
I don't know. The Inquisition, definitely not good.
The Inquisition was against
Definitely
who?
bad. Well, I mean,
Inquisition was against
Jews and
who?
Muslims.
But why was the Inquisition started?
They were trying to retake I guess it was after they retook back Spain from Muslim control, right?
That's
they were
not
kind of
why the
purging.
Inquisition was started.
All right, tell me, why did the Inquisition start?
There's the Spanish Inquisition and there's the Italian Inquisition.
I'm referring to the
There's also
Spanish Inquisition.
French Inquisition.
I'm referring to the Spanish
Well, the
Inquisition.
Spanish Inquisition and the Inquisition in general was started because of the Protestant Reformation. So it was
Okay, so
actually
why did
by
they
Christians-
start forcing conversions?
Because they didn't want Protestants to be Protestant. I'm just going to say it. They wanted them to be under the authority of the Pope. Now, this is an
Okay,
issue
so
that
that's a bad thing, right?
Yes.
Forcing conversions. Okay, so that's an example of a bad thing.
Yes.
How about
Exactly.
How about burning of witches in the puritanical era?
Salem.
Well, Salem would be an example,
Salem.
but it happened all the time, right? Salem
Well,
was just particularly bad.
From what I know is that this is just something that I know. I know that my family lineage, when they were there, they got kicked out for being too religious. So all I'm going to say is I'm going to quote this. There's a verse, and I think it's in Matthew, about Jesus talking to the religious people of his day. And he says, you clean the inside of the cup, or you clean the outside of the cup, but you do not clean the inside of the cup. And he said, and and when you look at scripture, who is Jesus's greatest enemies?
The cup.
No. Who were Jesus's greatest enemies?
The Romans. They were the ones who crucified him.
No.
I mean, they were the ones who crucified him, so I would say so.
Yes, but they crucified him under the orders of who?
Pontius Pilate?
Yes, but Pontius Pilate was not antichrist. In fact, Jesus said to him, "I'm the way, the truth, the life." And Pontius Pilate came to the realization that Jesus is who he said he is. Who were the people mocking Jesus? Who were the people that were yelling for him to be crucified?
You tell me.
The religious people, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. His own people had betrayed him.
Okay, what does this have to do with the Inquisition and the witch trials?
Because Christians, as they say they're Christian with their lips, but they deny him with their hearts. And it says that in Scripture
So
too. They
this is
acknowledge me with their
this
lips.
is no True Scotsman.
Yes. This is
Oh.
what?
This is a no True Scotsman.
Well, no. This is just me taking Scripture at this point.
Well, look, I'm just telling you. You asked what bad things Christians have done. I gave you 2 examples,
Yes.
and you're like, yeah, they're both bad. Okay.
Exactly.
So those are
But
bad. Those are examples of bad things that Christianity has done.
Let's look at the first century church then. How about that?
Sorry,
First century
I didn't hear you.
church.
Oh, the first century church. Yeah, sure.
Yes. What bad and good things did the first century church do?
They didn't really do much of either.
But I disagree.
They didn't really do much.
Justin
Period.
Martyr.
They kind of just spread.
Justin
Right.
Martyr.
What
Do you know
did
who Justin Martyr
do?
is?
No, tell me.
He was a first century Christian who
Mhm.
had a very philosophical understanding of Christianity. He used his philosophical understanding to try to reach people, and he was martyred for it.
Wait, so what good did he do? I'm sorry.
He contributed to the philosophical philosophy. He even started a school in Rome.
Okay, so when we generally ask what good did Christianity do and what bad did Christianity do, we're referring to like good deeds that like took place, like, you know, we might talk about feeding the hungry or something, and then we talk about bad deeds like crucify or like crusades or whatever. So saying, hey, this guy started a school, that wouldn't be an example of good things that Christianity did, right? That would be the example of like a good thing that a guy did if you view that as good.
Well, he was part of the church, but okay, we'll go with that route. So, according to historical understandings, 50% of the Roman Empire was slaves. And Christianity, first century Christianity, the Romans referred to it as the religion of women and slaves. And the reason why is because it was mostly the weak, the impoverished, the struggling, the suffering that turned to it. Because why? Because the Christians were feeding them and encouraging them. You even see this in James when James is
and because the Christians were promising, because the Christians were giving them false promises. Perhaps that's why.
That's a bias on your part. But
of course it is. But I mean, the point is that converting people is not. If you're going to make the claim that people converting is a good thing, I would think that that's actually a bad thing.
I'm not making that claim. Not once did I make that claim.
I mean,
the claim I'm making is that they were
you
feeding
made that
them,
claim implicitly.
They were clothing them, and then Justin Martyr was starting a school of philosophy. That's one thing you can claim. I'm also claiming that they gave to those who are needy. The Beatitudes. Do you know what the Beatitudes say?
Tell me.
What is the verse? You know what the Beatitudes are, right?
Roughly, it's a list of.
Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Blessed are those. It's the Sermon on the Mount. The thing is that Christianity is not targeted for those who are high and mighty and great. It is targeted for those who are weak and struggling in society.
That would be great, but that's not the world we live in today, unfortunately.
No, of course not. That's why exactly what I was saying earlier. We live in a fallen, broken world.
So I mean, like you might even make the claim that if Christians actually took the Sermon on the Mount seriously, the world would be a better place. Unfortunately, they usually don't.
No, American Christians don't. Now you go talk to some African Christians. Woo, they're fun. I love them.
You mean the African Christians who still put people to death for homosexuality?
No, I'm not talking. That's a bias. I'm talking about.
That's a bias. That's a real thing that happens.
Yes. Well, that's a bias on your part because Africa.
Wait, is that a real thing that happens or no?
Africa.
Hold on, is that a real thing that happens? Yes or no?
In Uganda, Uganda is the only country I can think of. In Cameroon, no, because Cameroon.
Okay, so that would be an example of. Were you excluding the Ugandan Christians from your claim about the Beatitudes, about how well they followed the Sermon on the Mount?
Am I also excluding American Christians when I say that, or European Christians?
Well, you said the African Christians, and then I mentioned something that some African Christians do that's really, really bad, and so presumably you weren't referring to those ones,
right? Muslims do that too.
Okay, you're not going to get me here supporting Islam.
No.
I'm not here to support Islam, brother.
At the same time, it's just Christians not following the greatest commandment. And that's where you actually have a very reasonable and logical point that I agree with, that if Christians would actually follow the Sermon on the Mount, the world would be a better place.
Yeah, if only
I
they
actually
did
agree
that
with
for
you
the
on that.
entire history of Christianity, because now we
Of
have.
course not. But that doesn't disprove who God is or who He said He
Well,
is, because
look,
it says
so
man
so
is
you
corrupt. All have fallen short of the glory of God.
this part of the conversation
Yes.
happened because you asked me for examples of good and bad things that Christianity has done,
Yes.
right?
Can you name some more in the first century?
In the first century, I don't think that Christianity did much of anything. Like, sure, there's probably charity in the first century.
So much.
No, they really
Oh my
didn't. Like
gosh.
the thing is you can't name events because they didn't have power back then. They didn't have power to do anything. You can name
Would
like,
you also
they generally were like good. They like fed the needy, but you
they
can't name
healed
like
people.
specific
How about-
things.
Wait. I have an example. They healed people. They brought people hope. They brought people encouragement. I mean, think of the story when
It's a
Paul
lot of
was
very
walking
vague
around and
things.
his shadow was healing
So
people.
so saying they healed people and brought people encouragement is a lot more it's a lot more vague and kind of like empty than like, oh yeah, they slaughtered 20 million indigenous people, right? Like I don't know, man. Like that's just not like I would rather they not have done genocides and then also maybe have not given people
The
hope.
first century Christian church did genocides.
No, we're talking about the entirety of Christianity, or are you only do you only count first century Christianity?
All of Christendom.
Yeah, right, aren't we?
Well, if you want to talk about the Native Americans, all I have to say is there was a California statistic.
Oh, I wasn't referring to Native Americans.
Okay.
I was referring to King Leopold. But yeah, the Native Americans are great too. We can talk about that too.
Disease. If you actually go and research.
Hold on.
Smallpox, the Black Plague. This is very basic stuff.
Wait, do you think that? Hold on. You realize that there were
yes.
That there were direct orders to exterminate people, right?
No, I'm not denying that.
To steal children and put them in residential schools, right?
The Pope during the 1600s quite literally wrote a statement. I don't remember his name. You can look him up. He wrote a statement that said they are fellow humans and we should reach them with the Christian faith. And then they were founding monasteries and churches all over the southwestern United States, and as well as in Mexico. And
yes, founding churches in the southwestern United States while at the same time, massacring the indigenous, right?
Not in that time frame. That would be later in the 1700s. But that's
the massacres of the indigenous took place all the way from the late 1400s all the way up till like the 1910s or 1920s, I guess. 1930s. Maybe 1930s, yeah.
Because the last revolt was in the 1930s.
So it was basically for the entire history of Europeans in North America.
Well, I mean, yes, but that generally happens in cultures classes. I mean, take Gaul and Rome.
Yeah, and it was Christianity that was responsible for that, right?
From what, the Gauls and the Romans in Gaul?
No. It was Christianity that was responsible for the essentially wiping out the indigenous.
Wouldn't you say it's more of human nature? Did I not mention to you earlier that man is corrupt?
So when it's so wouldn't you say it's human nature to be altruistic and help people in need?
I would say no, that's not human nature.
Oh, okay, well I disagree.
Man is inherently corrupt.
That is a very Christian view of yours, and I think it's disgusting, to be honest.
Well, I mean, let's look at the 20th century. Mm-hmm. In the 20th century alone, atheism has done what for the world?
I mean, we got Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose out of it.
We also got Joseph Stalin. We also got Mao
Zedong. Yeah, sure.
Hitler,
we got Hitler. No, Hitler was a Catholic, by the way.
Hitler did not believe. If you go read his writings, he most certainly did not. Now, in his early years,
why was Gott mit Unst on the belt buckles of the Gestapo or of the SS?
Why would a Christian?
Do you know what Gott mit Unst means?
Person? Not in German, but I'm sure it means something.
Okay, Gott mit Unst means God be with us, or God is with us.
Well, I also have heard
that was on the belt buckles of the SS members.
I also have heard this argument said. There are a lot of Christians out there, especially in the West, and who are cultural Christians. And they claim to be Christian, but they don't actually follow the teachings of Christianity.
Okay, so this is just no True Scotsman then.
Well, this is what you mentioned earlier, and I actually agreed with you on this. And I think this is a good place for me to
Well, no, a no True Scotsman is a fallacy. You're saying people aren't... No, it is. Just because they disagree with you, that doesn't make them not Christians.
No, it's the sense of they're not taking action on what they actually believe.
They believe that's exactly what they were doing.
Well, they say one thing, but they act another.
Most people tend to act on their beliefs.
If most people, Christians obviously don't. If a girl said to
Oh,
you
okay.
that she loves you,
Wouldn't
right?
that make Christians liars?
A lot of Christians do lie, and that's not what Christianity is. If a girl said to you that she loves you, right?
I would tell her
And
I'm
then
married and to
she,
fuck off because I'm a good husband.
well, okay. If your wife said to you that she loved you, but then with her actions, she went out and dated other guys, you probably wouldn't believe her, would you?
Yeah, I'd divorce her.
Exactly. And I think that's how it is with Christianity. In fact, do you know the story of Hosea and Gomer? This is a good one.
No, tell me.
So the story of Hosea and Gomer is that God told the prophet Hosea to go and marry a prostitute. And Hosea's like, really? And then he did. And she went out and slept around, and Hosea offered her everything and loved her with all his heart. And then Gomer, who was his wife, came crying back and was like, I'm sorry, I did all this. And the story is supposed to be a representation of how we are with God. We're like prostitutes in the sense of we say we love him, we say we believe in what his word says, but then we go out and act however. And it is a terrible example to those who don't believe in who Jesus Christ is.
So how do you determine who's a real Christian and who's not?
By their fruits, and also you cannot determine someone else's salvation. It is up to God.
Okay, so then
What
why have you been doing that this whole time? You've been saying no, those aren't real Christians. Those aren't true Christians.
Because I'm not there to judge. I'm here to say what is truth. And
well, how do you
truth-
know it's true? I thought that so you're allowed to judge. You're just not allowed to judge.
I'm allowed to judge myself, and I'm allowed to judge other people's lifestyle. If you claim to be Christian and I see you doing something that's not Christian, I'll tell you. But if you are not a Christian,
you know
I'm
what
not
sounds
there
Christian
to
to
judge
me?
how you live.
You know what sounds
What?
Christian to me? Not letting women speak in church.
That is a very out of context Bible verse. If you would like
What's
me
the
to explain it, I
context?
would be
Wait, what's
happy
the
to.
context that makes
So
it
the
okay to say
context
women
is
should
it
be
has
quiet
to-
in church?
Well, okay, there's a biblical context here. The context is that when St. Paul was talking to the specific church, the women would cry out mid-service and interrupt the whole service. And so when Paul wrote that, he wasn't writing that to say women to be quiet in church. He was saying, don't interrupt the church service. It'd
Why
be
didn't
like
he say
today
that
you walk
then?
into a church.
Why did he say
He
that?
was
Why
just-
did he
he
say
was
women
referring-
be quiet in church?
He was referring to a specific group of women.
Oh,
It'd be
okay.
like if you
Well,
walked into a
why
church
didn't he say
today
that then?
And they were crying out and making noise during the service. He did.
Why didn't he
said-
say that then?
He said that to all the women in the church. And all
Wait,
the
so
men,
were
because
all
they're
of the
being
women
loud.
crying out? Oh, were all the women crying out, and were no men crying out?
I don't know. What I do know is that it was there to keep order and restore order.
So
It's
so
also
where,
like the same thing with the
wait,
head
wait.
coverings.
So sorry. Where does it give that context?
I mean, if you read the Greek, you'll find the
Do you,
context
wait,
very
do you read
easily.
the Greek?
And there's also
Can you
yes,
read
I
Greek?
do.
Okay, can you read the Greek for us?
Not a lot, but I can read enough to where I can get through.
Well, I
it.
mean,
don't
I
have
can
a
read
Bible
Greek,
in
but
me.
I don't understand it.
I have an ESV on me right now.
Okay, so what is it? So it's 1 Corinthians 14:34. Women should remain silent in churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. It doesn't sound like some people were just interrupting. This says they are
What is
not
it?
allowed to speak, and they must
What's
be
the
in
verse again?
submission. 14:34.
1 Corinthians 14:34. Let me get there real
Yeah.
quick. I love this.
It
so
says if they
much.
want to
You have no
inquire
idea.
about something, they should ask their own husband at home. It is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
You say 1340?
14:34.
1434. Oh, and this is when he's talking about love. Nice. All right, let's see. 1344. There is no 1344. 34. There it is.
Yeah.
As in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, and they should be in submission to the law. Also says if there's anything they desire to learn, they should ask their husbands at home. Let's go back and read the.
Wait, what's
previous
the rest of
things.
that? What's
But
the
if
hold on?
there's
What's the
no
rest? What's the rest of that verse? Read the rest of that verse.
Where's it at? 13. If there's
Third-
anything they learn desire, husband at home is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Or
Yeah.
if it was the word of God they came to only through. Okay, well, let's read the
Yeah,
context.
it was just 34
So
and
if we
35 that I
read
wanted
the
you to read.
context, well, let's read the
Mhm.
context.
Sure.
1 Corinthians, we're going to start on 26,
Sure.
14:26. Orderly worship. Then, brothers, when you come together, each of you has a hymn or a lesson or a revelation or a tongue or interpretation. That is the gifts, a charisma. Let them all be done in building up. If any of you speak a tongue, let only one or two or three at a turn. Let someone interpret. But if there is no one to interpret, let each of them keep silent in the church. Again, he says that to keep silent to everyone. If they speak to God if they speak to himself and God, let two or three prophets speak. Let the other weigh on what they said. If a revelation is made to another sitting there, let the first be silent. For you can all prophesy one by one. All you may learn and be encouraged. and the spirit of the prophets is subject to prophets. For God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace. And then right after, what does he say? He talks about
And
women
it says
being quiet in
women should
church.
remain silent in the churches. The
Yes,
context
but
doesn't
what is
add
the
anything.
context?
The
No, it
context
does, because
the context says nothing about the context says nothing about women
do you know how the
interrupting.
gift of prophecy works with the gift of tongues?
Well, I think it's made up. I think it's people acting silly.
It's just a question. Do you know how the gift of prophecy and tongues work together?
How it works? It's people just being silly.
Well, no, that's a fallacy. That's not you understanding it. So according
Fallacy?
to
Okay.
to most Christian traditions, you especially find this in the Pentecostal tradition. I love my Pentecostal brothers and sisters. Of course, I myself am not Pentecostal. But if whenever you read in there, it talks about the gift of prophecy, and the way it works is that someone will speak in tongues, and then someone else will have a revelation from God, and they will interpret and they will prophesy to the other person. Now, tongues, according to the scripture, there are 3 types of tongues, and one of the types of the gift of tongues is for the unbeliever, and it's specifically referring to that. And so these
Sorry,
women would
what does
stand up
this
in
have to do with
church,
women? Where does it say anything about
because I'm getting there. I'm
women
getting
talking
there.
out
I'm
of
getting
turn?
there.
Where does it say anything about that?
I'm
Look,
getting there.
so
Hold on.
nowhere in verses
Hold
26 to
on.
33. Nowhere in verses
No.
26 to 33 does it say that women were interrupting in a particularly bad way that they shouldn't do. It just says the law says that they are not allowed to speak in church. It doesn't say
Hold on,
oh,
I'm
they're
getting
interrupting,
there.
they're being loud. It just says the law says they can't speak in church. If they want to learn something, ask their husband, because it's a disgrace if they speak in church.
Again,
That's what it
not a
says.
context. You
It's
have
not.
to read
We
it
just
in
we just read
context.
the context. The context doesn't talk
Yes.
about women at all.
It's not. But it's referring to what they were doing, because
No,
what
it's
happened is
literally
they
not.
were
It doesn't say anything about what they were doing. It doesn't say anything
talk
about
in
women doing
tongues.
anything.
Hold on. Can I get the Greek? Can I go get my Greek Bible?
If you want to, brother, but
Okay.
you're not gonna get one. You're not gonna get this.
Second.
I don't think you're gonna get out of the whole. It is that they are not allowed to speak.
See, but the context is prophecy, and prophecy within that context is that they were interrupting with prophecy, which I
It
explained
doesn't
the
say
gift of
that.
prophecy.
It doesn't say that.
See,
That's you are adding
it
words
may
into the
not
Bible.
say that, but it is very much implying that, and I need to pull up the Greek, because
That's on you. That's
ESV,
your interpretation, but that's not the
1
text.
Corinthians, Romans, Acts. Let's see. Galatians, Romans, come on. 1 Corinthians
We can actually just go look at
13.
It's 14.
14?
Yeah.
Yeah, 14. 14.
1433. It's the one in question.
33.
All right, I have.
All right.
Or yeah, 34. Okay, so I actually pulled up the Greek too. So we
Awesome.
have words like So I mean, I can read Greek, but my pronunciation will be terrible. But it says not for. So direct translation would be in 34. It says not for it is allowed to them to speak, but to be in submission, as also the law says. In 35,
read.
it's disjointed, but that's like the text, direct translation. So, ogar,
Okay.
epitrepatai, autias, lalain, ala, hypotasis thoson. Like, that is to be in submission. Not for it is allowed to them to speak, but to be in submission.
Okay, so go to 37 and read what 37 says.
37 says, if anyone thinks they're a prophet or otherwise gifted by the Spirit, let them acknowledge that what I am writing to you is the Lord's command. Oh, so God says that women shouldn't speak in church.
No. It's talking about a spiritual man, meaning if you think you're spiritually mature. And if you actually read it in the further context behind this, if you read even further back, Paul talks about being spiritual infants.
So where does it say anything about women like shouting out in church and interrupting? Which is what you said?
I'm going to go back to the context.
Okay, so you read the context. The context is that it doesn't say anything about women shouting out in church. Like, look, here's what you should do. John, this is the position you should take. You should say, yeah, I guess Paul was writing this. Paul was a misogynist, and we don't need to take it seriously because he wasn't Jesus. That's what you should do.
I think I'm missing something here, because I just went back and I know I can see the part about spiritual infants. I can see the part about prophecy, and I see the part about women being quiet in church. But whenever I read it, that's not what I get out of it. in a tongue of men, for no one hears in the spirit. If he speaks in mysteries, but is prophesying to men, speaks in edification, encouragement, and concert. For the one speaking the tongue himself edifies, the one prophesying in the church edifies. Now I wish all of you to speak in tongues, but rather in order that you may prophesy, that the one prophesying is greater than the one speaking in tongues, except he interprets, in the church edification. Brothers, if I come to you in tongues speaking, what shall I profit? Except to you, if I speak in revelation and knowledge and the prophecy of teaching, yet if I have lifeless sounds, if I'm being piped up and being harpened, this is very much directed against them.
It doesn't
Because
say
who
anything
else
about
would
women.
he-
Does it say
who
anything
el-
about women? Does it say
but
anything about women anywhere?
Who else would he be writing this to?
Men.
And he would be writing this to men
Everyone?
just by him mentioning women.
Well,
Women-
I mean,
okay.
he specifically says
You
brothers and
also
sisters
have to,
earlier.
Yes, and he's referring this to specifically the gift of prophecy with women. Dang, this is where I wish I had my Greek scholar friend because he knows every little word. I bet there's like
I mean,
one
look.
letter in here.
This like. I hope, as an
There's
honest
this-
interlocutor, you can see how
Yeah.
much you have to twist the interpretation here to even make it seem not horrible. Like, this is clearly a
Well,
case of first
no.
century misogyny, maybe second century misogyny. Like obviously it is. Obviously the people at that time believed that women were lesser and that they should speak when spoken to, that they should obey their husbands. And that's exactly
That's
what's written in this verse in 1 Corinthians. Like, it's
Let's-
obviously
let's-
the case. That's the plain text of the language. And the fact that you have to bend
Let's
over
go
backwards
back
to try to make sense of
to-
it, like that should scream something to you.
Let's go back to Genesis because this
Okay.
verse is a lot of context and you're not understanding the context.
We read the context.
That's okay. But
The
let's go back
context
to
doesn't help you
Genesis.
here.
If you go back to Genesis, what does it say about Eve? What is the Hebrew word for
lots
helpmate?
of things.
What is the Hebrew word for help?
I don't know. I can go find it if you want.
Go look up the Hebrew word for
Genesis
helpmate.
2.
There you go. Not
one
Genesis
sec,
2, but
let me-
it'll be in there.
It is Genesis 2.
Okay. I will create for you a helpmate. I believe is what it is.
So it says Eselo Ezer Kenegdo.
Yes. Yep,
So-
there it is. That's it. Now, what does Ezra Kenego mean?
Well, they're separated by a comma, so I don't think that they're exactly the same word, but it
No.
looks,
But what do
or it
they
doesn't seem
mean?
like so it looks like Ezer means help,
Help.
and Kenegdo
Yes.
means as his opponent.
No.
I mean, that's what the
What
word
is-
that,
what
that
is-
like if you directly translate it, but like if putting those two words together, it's like
Yes.
helpmate
but
or
that's
something
a
like that.
Very,
Help for him.
Very poor translation of the Hebrew word.
So it's
the
like
actual
help for
Hebrew-
him or something like that.
Yes, but the actual Hebrew means face to face. Because what does your opponent do? Your opponent faces you. But
Okay,
it
so
doesn't
what is
actually
the
translate
word
to
for
opponent.
face? What is the word for face?
It means face to face, opposite.
What is the
What is
word
it?
face? What's the word for face?
Well, that's in the context.
There's the words have meaning.
Yes, in the context. You don't take, for example, if you're reading a scientific paper, you take a statistic out of context. Is that going to be useful? Probably not.
Okay, Kenegdo means as his opponent. It means resistor, it means dragger. And then we can look up Ezer. Ezer means
Help.
I don't know why it's not.
But
Ezer
where
means
else
help.
is Ezra used? What anywhere else in Scripture? Where is Ezra used?
I mean, it's a name. So Ezer Kenegdo
not just a name.
is a helpmate. Like, that's the way that it's translated. If you want to
Yes,
say
but
that it's
that's
used
a
another way,
very poor
fine.
translation.
I mean, that's the standard
actual Hebrew
translation.
trans-
The actual
Hebrew
Hebrew translation does not have anything to do with
Yes.
faces. The word face isn't there.
No. The actual Hebrew translation, when you look at it, means face to face, opposite, help. Opponent, you're facing them. Now, of course, it does not mean that.
That's
you're an
wait, hold on.
opponent
That's just
to
not what
your-
it
to
means.
this
So
opposite.
neged means against. That's so Kenegdo would be like his opponent or something
But
like
put them
that.
together. Help
Yeah.
opponent
Sorry?
is help opponent.
Well, helpmate. Like
His help opponent. His help opponent. You're
Yeah, it's a strange phrase, which is why it's interpreted as a whole phrase as helpmate. If you want to break it down further, then it doesn't really make sense.
But why would they put help and opponent together? That doesn't make sense. It would be faced because your opponent is your.
But that's not.
opposite,
It doesn't
correct?
mean face to face. That's just not what it means.
I have to get up
What
the actual Hebrew.
what
to be honest,
translate?
I don't know the actual
I'm
Hebrew.
looking at the actual Hebrew right now.
Can you use an older form of Hebrew?
This is the Masoretic text that I'm looking at.
I know. Can you use an older form? Can you
I
find an older form for me?
like what older form of Hebrew do you want? Like from which copy of Genesis do you want?
Not a specific copy. I'm trying to think of a specific type. Anything before the 3rd century would be nice.
Okay, so you want to. So that means that you want a copy of Hebrew from before, or of Genesis 2 from before the 3rd century.
We can do the Dead Sea Scrolls, but then you'd have
I don't
to look
think
at
that.
all
I don't
little
think.
tiny
I don't think
Hebrew.
Genesis 2 is in there.
I don't think so. But I know Isaiah's in there. Dude, the Dead Sea Scroll. Oh my gosh, I love archaeology.
I
It's
guess
a
the
whole other
first one is the
topic.
5th century, is the Codex Alexandrinus.
Okay.
But the point
Well,
is,
try
and
that.
like, hold on. No, we're not doing this because you pointed at Genesis for hope that it would get you an out for Paul being a
And
fucking
I'm not trying to
misogynist.
find it out.
For Paul being a misogynist and saying that women shouldn't speak in church and that they should, that it's a disgrace if they do. So what was your point by bringing up Genesis 2?
Because I'm trying to get you to look at the Hebrew.
We just looked at the Hebrew. It didn't help you. So what's your point? How does this help you at all with regard to Corinthians?
Did, and I know that there's more to that. I just don't know Hebrew because I remember going it over in a specific
So what does this have to do with Corinthians?
class. Because it has to do with the fact that women and men are created equal in the image of God. And I think
Well,
that
not
you're taking
not
a
according
lot
to
of-
Paul.
As a person who has a major in religious studies, I believe you are taking a lot of scripture out of context.
We read the context together.
No, but I don't think you understand it, and I'd encourage you
We
to
read
read
it.
more
We read it right
scripture.
there. It never mentioned it. You said that women were speaking out of turn and interrupting. You said that that's what the context was. We read the context,
The
and it doesn't say that.
context was about the gift of prophecy, though.
Okay, so did you just lie when you told me that it was because women were speaking out of turn and shouting and interrupting church?
No, I'm saying that you don't understand what the gift of prophecy.
Okay, so why did you say that it was because women were speaking out of turn and were shouting and interrupting
it's
church?
specifically referring to the gift of prophecy.
Okay, well, why doesn't it say that with regards to women? Why does it single out women in this context?
Whenever he wrote the Greek, there were no periods, there were no commas, it was all one.
Why did he single out women
write
here?
that directly after, probably because they were speaking out in church with the gift of
So
prophecy.
this is an assumption of yours.
It's not
to try to excuse the misogyny.
It's simply an interruption. You're claiming it to be
Wait, do men not interrupt?
Of course, men interrupt, but in this
So
case,
why
it
did
was
he
not
only
men
address
who were
women?
interrupting.
And why does it
Cultural
say that? Why does it
context
say
as
that?
well as the context of the Bible?
Wait, so if he was just admonishing people for interrupting, why does it say they are not allowed to speak but must be in submission as the law says? This is not about admonishing. Apparently, that women shouldn't speak in church.
No. What is the law?
That's what it says. They are not allowed to speak
What
but must be in
is
submission
the
as the law
law?
says.
I know, but
That's
what
the
is
law.
the law?
That's the law that's
No,
being
no.
referred to.
What is the law in the Bible?
The law is, it's
If you
God's
read
words.
in the context, we're going to read this again.
We're not gonna read the whole thing again on live. It'll take too long.
There are two translations for the law. One, and I'm just going to simplify it for you. One is that the law is the 613 Jewish laws, which we are no longer under that law. The second translation of the law is the commands given by God, correct?
Yeah, and those commands.
And what
might be
is
the
the greatest
613, or
commandment?
they might not be.
We went over this. What is the greatest commandment?
I mean, I don't think that it says that there is a greatest commandment.
No. What is the greatest commandment?
I don't think that it says that there is one.
We read it earlier.
I don't think we did.
We did. Matthew. To love the Lord God with all your heart and love your neighbor. And so when he's referring to that, he's referring to the command. And I have a theory where he's referring to command. Now I don't know all of.
So hold on. Is it loving? Is
sure.
it loving of your neighbor to tell women to shut up in church?
Is it loving of your neighbor to interrupt something that they are?
It doesn't say they interrupt.
Encouragement from.
You're reading that into it to try to justify the misogyny.
I don't think you understand the context.
We read the
That's
context.
I'm also referring to the historical context.
It doesn't.
Like, for example,
you're reading stuff into it that's not there.
Well, I'm not really reading into it if I've read this a million times over and I know what I'm talking
Apparently you haven't, because it's not actually. There is no context that makes it okay to say women shouldn't speak in churches.
But the whole context is the whole scripture. You have to read it as one. You can't separate prophecy from women.
Why are you assuming univocality? Why are you assuming univocality?
Because there are no periods or commas in the original Greek text.
Why are you assuming univocality?
I'm telling you something. There's no
Why
comma
are you
periods, correct?
Yeah, the books are
Correct?
separate
When
books.
you read in Greek,
The books.
for the
I'm not referring to
Corinthians,
sentences in single passages. I'm referring to separate books. Why are you assuming univocality?
I'm not referring to books. I'm referring
I
to the
am.
single passage.
Why
of
are
1
you assuming?
Corinthians.
Why are you assuming univocality in the
I'm
entirety
not
of Scripture?
assuming. I'm telling you what the Greek, how the Greek works. The Greek works like this.
That's unrelated to the
When
statement
you
I made.
read Greek, you read it
Unrelated.
all the way through.
I'm aware.
All the way through.
Where?
Correct?
So
And
so where? So then
why
why'd
would
you bring up the
gift
whole
of
Scripture?
prophecy be
Why would you bring up the
separate
whole
from
Scripture?
this?
The gift
Why
of
would they be
prophecy is
separate, though?
because people can talk about more than one thing. What?
That doesn't make sense though, because you're not understanding.
It doesn't
what the
make
Greek
sense.
is.
Wait, so do you think that everything in one chapter is related to literally everything else, and that they can't talk about more than one thing?
I'm talking about specifically the New Testament Greek letters.
I'm aware.
They're all written to
I'm
one.
aware. I know. The point is that they can talk about multiple different things in the same text. Obviously, that's how people write. And clearly, even if they were talking about prophecy, they're singling out women to tell them that they're not allowed to speak in church.
And they're specifically referring it in the context of prophecy.
Yeah, so they can't speak in church. They're singling out women. That's misogyny.
They're not specifically referring to them speaking. They're speaking about prophecy, which is the entire point.
They're saying they are not allowed to speak. It doesn't say they're not allowed to speak about prophecy. They're not allowed to speak.
Prophesy outside of the Holy Spirit.
Well, that's not what it says. So, I mean, if you want to read that in
context.
If by in context you mean in your brain that you made up, sure.
No, and we read about prophecy. It's right
we did read about prophecy, and then it says stuff that women are not allowed to speak in church.
Yes, but that's not separate from the prophecy, correct?
Nobody ever said it was. Point is they are still not allowed to speak in church.
If I wrote something and I specifically said,
do you think that women were valued equally back then?
Of course not. But do you think?
Okay, so then why is it surprising that they would value women not equally here?
Well, because Christianity and the way the culture was back then is not the same thing. And the understanding of how
was Paul a man?
Versus how Christians treated women
was Paul a man?
The Romans treated
was Paul a man?
As property.
Was Paul a man?
Paul was, yes, but this is not a very good argument that you're about to make. Yes, he was.
Okay, he was a man. Was he, just given the times, was he more or less likely to respect women greatly? Just given the times.
In his context of Jewish tradition, most likely no. But then,
okay, and did he write Corinthians? Did he write Corinthians?
Yes, but you're not reading into the context.
So it seems likely. It seems likely that Paul, being a person who probably didn't respect women very much, who wrote Corinthians allegedly, probably was not respecting women in Corinthians.
Yeah, but again, you're
it's so obvious.
Use the same argument against you. I could say,
again, really?
You're reading into it.
I'm just reading the plain text. It says women shouldn't speak in church.
No, but you're not reading the context.
I'm reading the plain text. If you want to make inferences, if you want to read in your own dogma into it, that's on you. I'm reading the plain text.
No. There's no dogma. Let me give you an example.
Well, no, there is dogma that's happening here. That's why you can't accept the plain text reading of the text.
You cannot say that Paul was neither misogynist nor he was not a misogynist because you do not have the text to prove it.
The text to prove it is Corinthians 14:34.
No, because you're not reading in context. Now, if you say that, oh, well, he said this in the scripture, okay, but you're not reading in the context, and then you're assuming something outside.
No. I'm just saying he said that women shouldn't speak in church.
You're creating
blatantly,
your own
that's true.
Context.
I'm not talking about any context at all. I'm just saying he said women shouldn't speak in church.
The context that you are assuming is that Paul is misogynist because the culture back then is misogynist.
Well, it's likely, but I'm not assuming that at all. I'm just reading the text.
So why would it be unlikely that the gift of prophecy as well as the understanding of women being silent in the church is not connected? That doesn't make any sense. What you're saying is irrational. You're denying my point.
Regardless of the surrounding context, he's very regardless of the context. He's very obviously singling out women here, right?
Yes, of course, but he's singling out
which makes him a misogynist.
It doesn't make him if a woman is being loud.
It doesn't say that a woman's being loud.
No.
It doesn't say that anywhere.
If you are having a meeting and the women in the meeting are being loud, say it's just a business meeting.
Yep.
And you say, hey guys, this is how this is done when we talk in the meeting, blah blah blah. And then he singles out the people that are being loud.
Hey, you know what I wouldn't do if I was in a meeting, if I was in charge of a meeting and some women were interrupting or, conversing? I wouldn't say women aren't allowed to speak in the meeting. I wouldn't say that. Because I'm not a misogynist. Like,
No, but I think he's more referring to. Actually, I wonder what the Greek word for speak is. This is more just a curiosity. I apologize. I'm actually enjoying this conversation, by the way. I really enjoy it.
I appreciate that. I would enjoy it more if you recognized that Paul was a misogynist, and then not everybody was perfect back then.
Well, no, but at the same time, I mean, the Romans were far harsher toward women than what the Christians were.
That
I mean,
might
their
be
view of
true.
women was that
Still
women
misogyny
are property.
from Paul.
And then the Christians, they forefronted a lot of women's rights later on, and even they allowed Byzantine empresses
Cool.
to be in
Paul
charge of
still
things,
was misogynist.
like Theodora,
That's cool.
Irene.
Paul still told women to be silent in church.
Yes, within the context.
In the context.
Why
Didn't
do
you
you
guys
go to
know?
this verse and not say a verse like
Because you asked.
talking about?
Because we were talking about bad things that Christianity
Well,
promotes.
okay.
And this is an
well,
example.
Let's talk about slavery in the Bible then.
Wait. If you want to, but I don't know why
Yeah.
we're leaving the misogyny.
Because you wanna bring up this specific scripture, which I brought up Genesis, but then we can look at slavery. What does Paul write about slavery?
Slavery is also in the Bible. Why don't we talk about Leviticus?
No.
What is it,
But
25?
what does Paul write about slavery?
I don't know. You tell me.
I want you to look up the verse, all you slave traders, and because Paul writes a scripture about it.
What's the verse? By the way, just to be clear, I'm just announcing so everybody knows we are now changing the topic away from Paul's misogyny. Like, what about
Paul
Leviticus
writes-
25:44?
Within context, there's historical context.
What's
there.
the historical context of saying you are allowed to own other people as property?
Because you had to give yourself away as property in the first place. But
You
that's
may also
besides the
buy
point.
some of the temporary residents living among you and your members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property, and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly.
Okay.
Are we doing a context thing again for that?
We're-
Slavery is
you
fine
have
as
to
long
do-
as slavery is bad if you're doing it to your fellow Israelites. but-
Leviticus is a lot of like laws and traditions, right?
Yeah, it's the law from God,
So
right?
you'd have to read the entire, well, not just the law from God.
Well,
but you'd have
hold
to
on, is
read-
this the law from God?
It's also traditions. And
Okay,
tradition is a whole other
so
subject, which even Christians debate over tradition. But go back to the verse with Paul, because that's my main.
Okay,
point I'm trying
what's
to
the
hit on.
verse? What's the verse?
It is all you slave traders, and I think it's all you. It's also mentions homosexuality. All you slave traders and
Is it in
homosexuals. is the
Timothy?
verse, I believe. It might be. It's either in Timothy or I believe it was Paul. I'm pretty sure it was Paul wrote it though. Let me see. I can't look it up because I don't have a computer, but I have my Bible, so I have to look it up manually, and that's not always fun to do.
Oh, what about are you talking about Ephesians 6:5-8?
Might be. Read it.
Okay,
If
yeah,
that's it.
one sec, let me pull it up. Sorry, I don't know why I can't find it. Ephesians 6:5. Sorry, it's doing that thing where it asks you to verify if you're human. I'm human, I promise.
I don't
Come
believe
on.
you.
Ephesians 6:5. Slaves obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. That one?
Not that one, but that one's also in context because it's talking about
In
love.
context. Right, yeah.
Yes.
Definitely context that slaves obey
Um,
your masters.
Well, the context is they're obeying their Roman masters, but there's a specific verse, and I really want to look it up. I just can't freaking find it. It's on. Look up the verse on all you slave traders. That's what
I
it
was
is.
looking for it, I
Look
can't
up-
find it.
Look up all you Bible verse, all you slave traders and homosexuals. You'll find it, 100%. Let's see.
Alright, I'm looking. So let's see. Slave traders.
Oh,
is it
also,
Timothy? Is it First Timothy 1:10?
Maybe, but also going back to the verse you said earlier, the verse right after that is, "Masters, treat your slaves in the same way, since you know them, that he who is both the master and
Yeah.
yours
So
is in
this
heaven."
is going to be rough for you. I'm looking at First Timothy 1:10, which is the one that you're referring to.
Yes. I think.
So it's no, you're right. You're right. It is one you think. So it says we know. I'm just going to read the context. We know that the law is good if one uses it properly. We also know that the law is made not for those righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels, the ungodly and sinful, the unholy and irreligious, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murderers, for the sexually immoral, for those practicing homosexuality, for slave traders and liars and perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to the sound doctrine that conforms to the gospel concerning the glory of the blessed God, which he entrusts me. So you know what's happening in this verse, right? He's saying that homosexuals are just as bad as slave traders.
Exactly. I agree. Do you know?
Well,
do you want to know why?
It was nice talking to you, John. So yeah, we're not gonna do that. Sorry. So wow, Christianity teaches such self-hatred. This is sad. From Semper EQ. I appreciate you. Thank you for the $2. Kurt ends. This caller started with universal moral law. He absolutely did, didn't he? Thank you for the $2, Kurt. All right, let's bring up another guest. We have a guest who's been waiting for so long. Yeah, by the way, if you want, if you like the live, if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like the live and we can talk about it. Or feel free to like the live. If we get to 100K, I'll put my hair down and you guys love that stuff. Also, if you want to support the live, you can do so via Cash App. You can do so via Super Chats, via TikTok stuff. All great ways to support the live. Overland Adventures, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. How are you?
Glad to hear it. I'm doing all right. So you are an evangelical astronomer. Astrophysicist, did you say maybe?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Let me say, can I say
go.
first I want to, I absolutely love your science videos.
I
They're,
appreciate that.
whenever I run into them on my FYP or whatever it's called, I always am excited to see them. You do a great job.
So what kind of astrophysics do you do, if you don't mind? Yes.
I left the field. Okay, so I still have my hand in it in astronomy professionally, but I left the field in the early 80s. My field was X-ray and optical astronomy.
Oh, okay, so it's been a while.
I worked on the HEOS. Yeah, it's been a while since I was in the field. Yes.
Yeah.
I run an observatory for a university that I built and donated.
That's cool.
So I do stuff. I was a board member, member of the AAS, stuff like that you would know.
Sure.
But I wanted to, and we talked once before. I tried to steer you to a man named Alan Sandage. I don't know if you ever looked him up or not.
I don't remember.
But he has some very interesting. Yeah, and I was surprised you hadn't heard of him. He's, he, in terms of who he was as a cosmologist, he was an observational astronomer. He's like one level below Edwin Hubble.
I think I remember. I remember this conversation. Yeah.
So, but he's got some excellent writing on his Christian beliefs and how they fit in. How he had no issues, or he didn't feel there was any incongruency in his faith and his dedication to science.
I mean, that's cool. I'm glad that he can do that. I'm glad that he could do that. That's neat.
But the reason that I wanted to say something, I have an answer. I have a definitive answer, and I'm going to give it to you from the Bible of a question you've asked.
Sure.
That's very important. And this definitive answer is more for other Christians listening to this than it is to you, because I know you're gonna agree with part of it. But you've asked a question: can you or I or anyone convince you to believe in God? And I'm going to give you two examples where the Bible says no. Clearly, Jesus himself said, "No, I can't. There's nothing I can do."
Okay, but then
let me. Well, because for two reasons. But let me. Well, for one thing, to take the pressure off people who are trying to convince you. They're not going to be able to.
Some people want to. Like, if you just want to tone police and be like, yeah, nobody will be able to convince you anyway, like, then,
But let me just tell you the two scriptures I wanted to mention, and we can talk about them or just move on. When Peter, near the end of Jesus' life, the end of his ministry, he took Peter aside and he asked him, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter basically told him, "They say you're a prophet, a great teacher." He said a lot of things. And he said, "Well, Peter, who do you say I am?" and he said, "You are the Son of God." And I'm going to tell you exactly what Jesus said to him when he said that. He identified him as God in the flesh. He said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." So, and for Christians that are listening to this, I want you to listen to something. Jesus didn't even say that he himself convinced Peter that he was the Son of God. It was God himself that informed him that he was God. One other quick scripture. This will only take a second, and I'll be
All right,
done.
but it's about me. It's addressed to me, right? Not to people, not to other
It
people.
is addressed to you.
All
No,
right.
it is addressed to you. In John 6:44, Jesus said, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them."
Okay.
So,
So, question about that. Why doesn't
yeah,
God want a relationship with me?
he does.
So
That's not the issue.
why isn't he drawing me then?
I can't actually. I actually cannot answer why God draws some and not others. I can't
It just
answer
seems
that.
like
I don't know.
if he wants a relationship with me, then it seems like, as an all-powerful being, that he would achieve his desires, namely he would achieve a relationship with me. But it seems like he's failing to do so.
Well, I think the answer is complicated. It's not that simple, but it has to do with how God himself has chosen to build a family. I don't know why so many people aren't going to wind up in it. I
mean,
and
God
it
wants
is not
everybody in his family, right?
that's true.
But
He says
so is
it's
he? So is he?
not his desire that anybody perishes. That's what it says.
Is it possible for an all-powerful being to fail to meet its desires?
No,
So,
no.
but if his desires are not met, namely some people perish, it seems
I
like
think that
this is an
yeah.
all-powerful being failing to meet its desires.
I'm sure you've heard this before, in terms of free will, that God did not want to have robots in his family. He wanted to have people that were like him. We're made in his image, it says. We
Well,
have
right, but
a
that doesn't mean
choice
that
to
he
do
didn't
right and wrong.
fail. It just means that he failed. He failed because of free will, but he still failed.
Well, we failed. I mean, the way Christians would answer that is that we failed, not him. We were given the choice to do the right thing, and we didn't.
Let me give an example. Let's say my goal is to, let's say I'm a lifeguard, right, at like a pool or something like that. And my goal is to keep everybody alive. That's my goal. Now, if some kid decides to jump in the pool and then have a hold your breath contest, and then do a hold your breath contest while the other kids hold me back so I can't jump into the pool, I still failed to keep that kid alive, even if it wasn't my fault. So even the point of the analogy is that even if it's not God's fault that he failed, he still did fail. He
All
failed to achieve
depends
his
on
goals.
what he was trying to do.
Well,
his goal was not to make sure his goal wasn't to make sure everybody got into heaven. His goal was to build a family.
I thought his goal was to, I thought that he has some desires. Those desires are to ensure that, or those desires are that nobody perish, but some people do.
I think that just reveals his heart. That's not a command. Hey, I will not fail. It is. He is sad because
So if
it's
he
not
doesn't,
true.
so does he desire it? Because
He's
if he
grieved.
desires
He's
it, then he
grieved.
would do something
Yeah,
about it.
he does.
Then why doesn't he do something about it?
Well, unfortunately, and you're going to hate this, we don't have all the answers, and the Bible tells us that we're never going to fully understand the mind of God, how and why he has done stuff. So I can't answer that. I don't know.
Could God be, so would you say that that God always does things for a higher good? Even if you don't understand why he does them?
Yes, I would say it this way, that God is that he has a good and perfect will.
So
How we would look at that doesn't necessarily equate to what we would consider great
Sure.
or good or perfect.
Totally understandable. So, would you say that God could, do things that seem not right, but they are right? It's just we don't understand it?
Yes, I would say
Okay.
that.
So, is it possible that God could be deceiving you about the entirety of reality, but for some higher purpose that you don't understand?
No, no, because there is no deceit in God. I mean, I'm just going off what the Bible says
But
now,
couldn't
obviously.
he be couldn't it be that he's doing something that appears to be bad, but actually it's good because it's for some higher purpose?
He can't do bad, so I mean, I can just say
He's not
that.
doing
But
bad.
he
He's not
certainly.
doing bad. It's for a greater good, right? Like the same way how
Well,
when God does seemingly bad things, like allowing people to die in earthquakes, that's like for a seemingly greater good. That natural law is a good thing because it allows for maximal flourishing or whatever.
that's not a Christian worldview. I'm just telling you that
I'm just
that's
giving an
not a Christian
example. Like
worldview.
I'm just giving an example. Like
But that's not the way
how
I would.
you.
Let me tell you how it.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Let me tell you what's wrong with that description. What's wrong with that description is God causing that to happen. God doesn't cause natural disasters. The way the Bible describes our dilemma is we broke Earth. We broke it. We
But
rebelled
I mean
against
that's
God. A bunch of bad things happen consequentially that
hold on.
God
But
has
that's
allowed.
nonsense, right? Because earthquakes happened before humans existed.
Well, we're
So
talking about
it
people,
can't be
people
it can't be
dying in
humans' faults.
earthquakes.
Well, I know.
We're
I mean, like
talking about
people die in
people, the
earthquakes
death.
because
We're talking.
earthquakes happen, right?
Yeah, you asked me why people die in earthquakes. Why people die at all is because we live in a fallen world and death came into the world.
So like just as a hypothetical, what do you think would happen during an earthquake if humans hadn't sinned?
Well, there would be no death, so it really wouldn't matter.
So like
I
what
don't know
happens
how.
during an
I can't
earthquake?
explain to you.
Like
I can't
let's say
explain
that
to you
there's an
what would
earthquake.
happen.
You're in your sinless world. You're hanging out in the garden or whatever. An earthquake happens, and then like a boulder falls on you.
I
You
mean, you're
don't
asking me
die,
something.
but what?
You're asking me what the world looked like before sin, and I can't answer that other than it was without sin and without death, and that it was perfect. I don't know.
But were
You're
there
asking
earthquakes
for.
before? Because
I don't
there
know.
were definitely earthquakes before humans. Certainly, we agree on that.
Well, okay. I mean, it's like I would have no reason to disagree with that.
And so, like, if the earthquakes happened before humans, then, like, for example, we might even agree that, like, there were people before humans, right?
It's
Sorry, not
possible.
people, animals. Animals before humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like,
Life.
an earthquake happens and, like, crushes a deer to death. Like, that's pretty fucked. And it has nothing to do with humans.
I don't see how, I don't see a theological tie anywhere to what you're saying, but
Well, no. All I'm
death
saying
came
is
into the
that
world.
all I'm saying is that like God created a world that allows earthquakes, and it just seems like that causes immense suffering for animals and humans alike. And he could have made it otherwise, but chose not to. And why did he choose not to? Well, maybe there's some higher reason for why it's good that earthquakes are possible.
Well, I'm not a theologian, and I am not qualified to answer some of these questions. But how I would answer that is, God lives outside of time. He lives in a dimension where he lives outside of it. He can see the beginning from the end. He can go back to the beginning, and he can see the very end whenever that is. He can see into eternity. And so he is not surprised what happened to us in his creation of the world, where there were going to be earthquakes and all these kinds of natural disasters that take life. He already knew what was going to happen, and that we were going to occupy that space before sin came into the world. So
Look, all I'm
again,
saying is that like before sin came into the world, there was suffering that happened, and I think that's like a pretty
no, I don't
unimpeachable
agree with that.
statement. there was suffering. You don't think that
I
like
can't say that,
deer
no.
could like? Do you think that like animals can suffer?
Well, I don't. Animals aren't people. Animals
you-
don't have souls.
They can still suffer. Like they can still experience pain. They can still be miserable. They can still suffer. Like it's pretty obvious if you
Okay.
ever like had a pet, like that, your pet can suffer definitely.
I can't speak to theology about animals, is what I'm telling you. I
I'm
don't
not
know.
talking about theology. I'm just talking about common sense. Like if you've ever like seen your dog in pain, like it's very clear that they're suffering.
I'm telling you, people didn't suffer. That I can tell you.
I'm not talking
People
about
did
people. I'm
not
talking
suffer
about
before.
animals.
I can't answer that.
What do you mean you can't? I mean,
The
like
Bible doesn't.
I'm not asking for
Bible
a biblical
doesn't
interpretation.
describe.
I'm not asking for that.
No,
I'm asking
there's.
for you to use your common sense. Did animals suffer before humans existed?
My common sense doesn't work in that environment. You're
You can't
asking
wait.
me about a
To
physical.
be clear, you can't reason about what humans were doing before, or what animals were doing before humans existed.
I can't.
That
Not
just
in the
seems like
context that you're
that seems like
asking me.
I'm just asking you: is it possible that animals could be in pain and suffering prior to humans existing?
Sure. But animals, you know, how does God view the suffering of animals? I don't have any idea.
I'm not. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking about that.
Okay.
I'm asking: did they suffer?
Well, I mean, the intuitive answer is yes. I can't say that with absolute assurance, but the
Okay,
intuitive
but can you
answer
say
is
anything?
sure.
But
Yeah.
surely you can't say anything with absolute
Yeah,
assurance,
they have.
right? So like the
No.
fact of the matter is that they suffered, and it wasn't necessary for them to suffer, right?
See, it's like, I don't know. I mean, that I'm not sure how to answer your question. You're asking for me to answer that wouldn't be based on anything I understand about the Bible, which is what we're talking about, and God. And if you want to ask me as a scientist and what nature informs me, that sure, I can answer affirmatively to everything you just said.
Yeah, I'm
There is
asking
a
you to.
world outside of the one that we live in. There is a
Yep.
world outside of the world we live in that I'm telling you is spiritual in nature, that is supernatural. It is beyond
Right,
natural
I'm asking about the world that we
that we're
live in.
talking about.
I'm asking. Well,
You're
I'm
asking me
asking
about the you're asking me about the
I'm
you're
asking
asking
about
me
the
about the
world that
natural
you and
world.
I both occupy. Yeah, and in which animals definitely suffer. Happens all the time. If a
Yeah.
deer starves to death because its foot gets caught in a bear trap, it definitely suffers, right? And so all I'm saying is that the world could have been different in such a way that animals didn't suffer as much. Maybe some amount of suffering is necessary. Maybe you need some amount of suffering so that lions can eat or something. But clearly we can agree that some amount of suffering isn't necessary. Like why is it necessary that like animals get cancer? Like that seems unnecessary. And so but we at least many Christians, I don't know about you, will say, well, this is for a greater good. There is some reason why God made it this way, which
that's just not biblical. Yeah.
Well, sorry, I guess a lot of Christians aren't biblical.
They're not. You're absolutely right.
Is your answer essentially, if it's not biblical, your answer is essentially I don't know, which is fine if it is.
Well, if there isn't something clear in the Bible, I am only left with the natural world. And so if you're going to ask me a spiritual question and all I have are the tools of the natural world, I don't have comfort answering the question. If we were in class at school and you asked me these questions and we weren't talking about God, we weren't talking about the supernatural, I could easily answer these questions and not worry about it. But we wouldn't have the context of God and creation and what God's intentions were. It's like, why do stars explode? Did God want stars to die that way? It's like, I don't know. They just do. I can tell you that they do.
So would you say that it's impossible for God to lie for greater purposes, or for God to be deceptive, or for God to not tell the full truth?
I would tell you that's what the Bible says, yes, and I believe it.
What if there were places in the Bible where he says one thing and then the opposite happens?
Where he says one thing and the opposite happens.
Yeah.
That would be a problem.
So I believe, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I can find it if you want, but I believe at one point during This is when Joshua is in control, or commanding the Israelites. God says, "Surely you will go take the hill country in the land of the land of Canaan, and I will be with you, and you will be victorious." And then in another passage, and I can go find it. It says, well, Joshua and his commanders were successful in all places except the hill country, because the Canaanites there had chariots of iron, and so they were not successful in taking the hill country.
Well, there's a lot more to that story where they
that's
actually
the
went
basic
back and did do it.
But the point is that God told them that they'd be successful, and then they went there to try to be successful, and they were not successful. Right?
Yeah, they caved. They didn't listen to God in that example. They didn't listen. They didn't believe him.
What do you mean? They went to go try
They
to
didn't
take the
believe
hill
him.
country, and they failed.
I'd have to go study that scripture again, but what I can tell you from memory is they gave up on God, not the other way around. In any battle,
why would they go do it then? Why would they go do it if they gave up on God? Why would they go try to take the hill country?
They lost their courage. Why did the disciples? I'd have to study again, I'm not a Bible scholar. I've studied all these scriptures. I'd have to go back and refresh my memory about the entire story that you're referring to answer the question. But if God told them that this was going to happen and they failed, it was because they failed. They distrusted God somehow in that story somewhere, and I would have to identify it by looking at it. God. The thing that I have never seen in studying the Bible for 30 years is an area where God said something like that. He didn't mean it. He was simply hoping that were true, and he was basically a deceiver. I've never seen that.
What about Ezekiel 14:9? And if the prophet be deceived when he hath spoken a thing, I, the Lord, have deceived that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand upon him and will destroy him from the midst of my people Israel.
Yeah, again, I'm not a Bible scholar, but in my listening to what that scripture, it's that guy was never a prophet to begin with. Is the Bible's way of saying that, and he's gone.
But why would God say that I have deceived him?
No, he's saying if that were to happen, I would have deceived you. And he's not a deceiver. He's saying I didn't do that. This guy's fake. He's identifying the guy as fake. But he's not capable of deceiving you.
That seems to be saying that God can deceive him.
That's a turn of a phrase. Look, what would be the equivalent? If he's saying if I did something, and it turned out to not be true, then I'd be a deceiver. I'm not a deceiver. Is what he's in the next scripture is. I'm not. That guy is a dead man for deceiving you.
Look, I mean, it's fairly evident to me, whether it's through that scripture, through it's the entirety of Job, whether it's through Joshua's description of or Joshua's I suppose no, it wasn't prophecy. I think it was it Jeremiah about the iron chariots. It seems like God is capable of doing seemingly bad things, but for good reasons.
He allows them, but he says he always
he does seemingly bad things, right?
That's not true. I mean, that's not true. He allows bad things, but he uses bad things for the good.
What about all the stuff that he did to Job? That was seemingly bad stuff that he instructed Satan to do, right?
Satan had to ask permission to do everything he did to Job.
Yeah.
And God gave it to him. He
Right,
allowed him to. So that's that's not prescribing it. That is allowing that to happen.
I mean, wasn't and I could be incorrect, but wasn't the whole thing is that God wanted to see how tough Job's belief was? So he's like, yeah, go ahead and test him, Satan.
No. Satan was taunting God, saying, the only reason these people are following you is because you are good to them. And he said, well, okay.
Yeah, so he said,
I'm going to allow Job to be
go,
tested.
Yeah, he said, okay, go test my guy. He told him to go test him.
That's what he did say. Yes. Let's see if that's true. Let's see if that's true.
The bad things, the testing was doing bad things to Job.
He allowed Satan to do horrible things to
He,
Job. That is correct.
he
He
didn't
did.
allow Satan. He said, yeah, go do it.
Well,
Right?
he allowed him. It was permissive. God didn't put these things on him. Satan did.
Well,
And
yeah.
God didn't stop
Look,
it from happening. He
right,
didn't stop him.
So, and the reason why was because there were greater purposes.
Yeah,
Like
but God, you know, look,
this is super standard. Like it's super standard, like apologetics, to be like, yeah, God can sometimes do seemingly bad things, but sometimes it's for a greater purpose, and that's like that's standard Christianity.
no, it's not. Look, I'm
It
I'm
very
not a
much
Bible
is.
scholar, but God,
I mean,
God
like
does
why do you
not
think the flood
do
happened?
bad.
Why did God do the flood? Why did
Because
he
he was
kill
so grieved with
billions?
this,
Why
with
why
the
didn't he
sin
kill?
of
Why
man.
did he kill millions of people? Because that's a
He wanted to
seemingly bad
start
thing.
over.
So
Yeah.
why did he do a seemingly bad thing?
Again, the concept that I can't accept is that it was a bad thing. It was a necessary thing.
I said
He destroyed
seemingly bad.
evil.
I said seemingly bad.
Okay. Okay. Well, then, because he wanted to wipe out evil.
Right. So
and start over.
God can do God can do murder, a sin, if it's justified. Right?
Well, see, that's why I don't like answering the question, because you'll take the answer and then say something like that, which is not true. You said seemingly.
Well,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
said,
I mean,
okay,
like,
well,
like it is seemingly evil. Like you know, killing people is murder, right?
well, if he
Which is a
killed
sin.
Hitler, would that be evil?
It might not be evil, but it's still murder.
It's taking a life, that's for sure. It's the very life that he gave him to begin with. It's his
So
to
look,
take.
the only reason I'm asking all of these questions is because it seems totally plausible for God to do things that are seemingly not in his nature if it's for a good reason.
Well, the flood is a good example. I'm going to have to concede. Again, I am not a Bible scholar, so I'm not, nobody should hang their hat on anything that I say about that. But yes,
Right.
that God, the flood came about because God wanted it. And
Right.
uh,
And
he
that's
had
like
judged.
obviously that like I agree with you. Like God can do things under your worldview. God can do things that are seemingly bad, but if he has a good reason, then it's okay. Right? So why couldn't he lie to
Like,
you if he had a good reason?
well, because he says he doesn't. I'm just telling you. He says he's not a liar or a deceiver. He says it clearly.
Doesn't he say does it ever say that he doesn't change?
Yes, it does.
But there are also places where it says he changes, like he changes his mind.
Those are in the context of the telling of the story of man in ways that we would understand. Like, for example, God, when he forgives sin, he says he doesn't remember it anymore. I mean, does God literally forget that I stole my brother's lunch money? No, he didn't forget that. But it is a turn of a phrase. When forgiveness comes, it's as if he doesn't even remember it.
I mean,
So,
I'm pretty sure.
yeah,
Is it Ahab or is it Jonah? I can never remember. When God literally changes his mind, he says, "Yeah, I was gonna do this, and then I decided not to." I can find the verse though if you want. Is it Jonah?
Again,
Yeah, I don't remember.
they're
off the top of my head.
turns of a phrase.
Well,
In a situation like that,
it's
a God that knows the beginning from the end. Okay.
Let me go pull it up. Jonah 3. Jonah 3. Here we go. Bible Gateway. Jonah goes to Nineveh. Okay. Right. So this is Jonah 3:10. The context is, God told Jonah to go to Nineveh to say that there was a message that he was going to destroy the city. Blah 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 blah. And then Jonah 10 says, when God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened.
Yeah.
Which is just
That's
an example
correct.
of God saying, yeah, I was going to do this, and now I'm not.
That was for our benefit to see that, not God's. God already
then
knew
why
that
did he
was going to
change his-
happen.
So then he lied when he said
He
that he was
really
going to do
didn't.
it. But he said he was going
Again,
to do it.
it is. You have to listen to the analogy I gave you. You know, the book is written to people. We have to understand a being that we can't even fully understand. So, for example, when he says he forgives sin, he forgets it. He literally can't forget anything. Okay. But it is a way we can understand forgiveness, that he remembers it no more. It's gone. And so when God says he relented, he already knew he was going to do that. He knew what Jonah's response was going to be. He knew what their response was
But
going to
then,
be. All of this was for our benefit.
so then why does
And
it say
so
that he
it is a
changed his
phrase.
mind? Why did it change that why did it say that he was going to do this and then he wasn't?
Well, it's like relativity. It's like, from the observer's viewpoint, it looks like God changed his mind. God didn't really change his mind. From the frame of
So
reference
what the
of the
text
viewer, me
says
and
just
you
doesn't
and
matter.
Jonah, that's what it looked like.
So
It
what the
does
text
matter,
says
but
just doesn't
I'm trying to
matter?
explain it to you. It does matter. It
Well,
does matter.
because
I'm
it said, the
explaining.
text says that he changed his mind.
That's what it appears. That's what it appears to have been to us. He already knew what was going to happen. I mean, answer that one. In the Bible, it says he
Well, I
already
don't
knew
think
what
he.
was going to happen from the beginning to the end.
Well, I think that you're reading
Everything. There's
univocality
nothing
into
he's
this.
not.
I think that you're reading univocality into the Bible where it's not, where you shouldn't. I don't think that the
What
authors
does
of
that mean?
Jonah had that view.
The authors of Jonah were putting down a story that had very important spiritual principles for us to learn from, and the way that it was communicated to us so that we would understand is that when Jonah obeyed and he went and he preached to the Ninevites and they responded, God withheld judgment on them.
Yeah. So what
And
I mean when I say
so by all
univocality,
appearances,
what I mean by
yeah.
univocality is that the author of Jonah, or authors of Jonah, we don't really know. I don't think it's correct to say that the author of Jonah believed that God was unchanging, believed that God was outside of time. Just from the plain text reading of the story. Just from the plain text
I
reading of
don't
the
believe
story,
you
it's
or I
clear
can
that
answer that.
Sorry?
I don't think we could come to that conclusion. No, you can't conclude that.
Well, from the text, it's clear that the author thought that God was able to change his mind.
I think if we were able to ask Jonah or whoever the author of that book was, hey, do you literally think God literally was surprised by what happened and changed his mind as a result? I think they would say no. I can't prove that.
I would bet you $1,000 that they would say yes.
Well, we'll find out. At least I'll find out someday.
Well, or you won't.
Or I won't.
Or you won't.
That's true. Yeah. But there's no way to know the answer to that question.
I forget how short Jonah is. Such a
4 chapters, right?
Yeah, it's like 4 pages.
Yeah, and it's a book about preaching to your enemies, by the way, people that hate you.
It's a weird
book about forgiveness.
I mean, also Jonah 2.
It's all about forgiveness.
In Jonah 2 with the fish, like it's a weird story, dude.
Jonah didn't want to preach to these
he was
guys
in a
because
fish.
how horrible.
He was also in a fish.
This would be like Bibi Netanyahu having to go to Palestine to preach to Hamas. Salvation.
I mean, look, I agree. It's a weird story.
Like.
I agree. Anyway,
and it's about forgiveness, and that God doesn't want anybody to perish.
It is. It's about God changing his mind and forgiving the people of Nineveh.
Well, we disagree on the changing your mind part. I've given you my explanation of it.
Fair enough.
And,
all right. Overland Adventures. I'm probably going to let you go
differently.
because you've been on for a while. But thank you for being here, brother.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right. You keep making them science videos. I love them. Okay.
I will. Thanks for being here, brother.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.
All right, y'all. I'm going to bring up another guest. But before we do that, I just want to go grab my water bottle. So don't go anywhere. I'll be back in 2 seconds. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail or something. I don't know. What does it say? 2 shakes of a... I got it right? 2 shakes of a lamb's tail? Oh. I got an idiom right. That'll touch me. I don't think they can hear me, by the way. Maybe they can, who knows. I feel like I should have mixed idioms. Like 2 shakes of a... I don't know, something else funnier. Right? Alrighty-o, I'm back. Somebody asks, is Q-Top an honest debater? No, of course not. He's a precept. Of course he's not. Of course he's not an honest debater. Alright, let's bring up Odin. Let's see if Odin's still here. Odin, can you hear me alright? Odin, can you hear me? Looks like they're not here. Alright, let's bring up the recapitulationist. The recapitulationist. Can you hear me alright?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sweet.
Can you hear me?
Let me. Yeah, I can. Let me just get your name up. The recapitulationist.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
All right, sweet. So, what you got for me?
So I wanted to mostly argue, mostly just generic theism, as per the philosophical argument of Blessed John Duns Scotus, so I don't have to just seem like I'm claiming my own argument. And that's pretty much going to be my main point. I'm very open to also discussing basic supposed contradictions within the Bible, but I would want to get to that later if you want to. But that's my main point that I wanted to argue here today, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what argument are you going to use? Actually,
So
better yet,
I
why don't you
would,
just make the
appeal
argument?
Oh, okay, sure. So I'll use a Socratic syllogism, so it'll be easier, so people can follow along as well. So, can things possibly exist?
Can things possibly exist? Sure.
Yes.
So, by the way, just a quick question: are you
Is
listening
the
to me?
possibility of something existing dependent on the thing actually existing?
Sorry, recapitulationist. Are you listening to me on YouTube? Because there's a big delay.
I'm listening to you on the whatever the invitation thing is called.
Yeah.
I'm just in Australia, as you can see from the light, so that might be part of the reason why there's a big delay.
Yeah, it's making it really hard to have a conversation. Do you have a TikTok account by chance? Because if so, then I can bring you up on TikTok and it'll be a better connection.
No, sorry. I found you on YouTube Shorts, if anything.
No. That I understand. The connection is just really, really rough. Do you want to try disconnecting and then reconnecting?
Sure, I'll try that. And
yeah, okay. Let's try that and see if we can make it work.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, I'll be right back.
Yeah, you gotta stay hydrated. Gotta stay hydrated. Otherwise, what are you doing? What are you even doing if you're not hydrated? All right, let's see if he's back. Getting a migraine? Yeah, you absolutely are getting a migraine if you're not hydrated. True. Does that paper about black holes and humans change if you're dehydrated? Probably. I might make a video about that because that was written by one of my colleagues, one of my collaborators, and it's like such a delightful paper. Like, it's so funny. Like he wrote a serious paper about what would happen if a black hole hit a person. Like, that's wild to me. All right, you're back. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I fine?
I think so. We can try.
There's a bit of less of a delay with this one now.
It seems like there's less of a delay for me.
Yeah, there is also less of a delay for me as well, which is
okay. So let's just try it like this. If it gets too bad, I'll let you go and we can try it again another day. But yeah. So you were.
Sounds good.
So why don't we start over from the syllogism? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So so things possibly exist, right?
Sure.
Okay. The notion that things possibly exist is not dependent on the reality that they actually exist, right?
I don't know what you mean by that. Can you elaborate?
So, okay, so considering a chair,
Yeah.
the chair doesn't need to actually exist in order for us to consider the possibility.
Yeah, but I think that the kind of possibility that we're considering there is not like some metaphysical possibility. I think it's just like, you know, we know what chairs are, and we know that chairs can be in different places, and so the chair could be here or it could be there. Somebody could make a chair. So it's kind of like this physical possibility, right?
But we can consider metaphysical possibilities independent of the actual reality that they exist, though. Like,
I
we
don't-
can consider...
I'm not so sure about that, actually.
Really? So you would say that I can consider... like, for example, I can write a story that doesn't actually exist and could be based upon completely fabricated notions that's like not in any way based upon the reality that actually exists, and that's not actually metaphysically possible.
Well, look, I think when you write a story, I think you're taking concepts from reality that we're familiar with, and then combining them in perhaps novel ways.
Okay.
And so that's all we're doing when we're talking about like chairs. Like, you know, we have this concept of a chair being there, and then we're combining it with the notion of here, and then we say, oh, well, we can combine the notion of the chair there with the notion of here, and then we get, it's possible that the chair is there. We have like a conceptualization.
But the notion of chair as a metaphysical concept doesn't just simply exist within the mind. Like, while I would agree in the sense that it's not just simply, I wouldn't so far assert that it's a universal that pre-exists like a Platonic idea. But there is something that exists outside of the mind that could be at least considered a common nature within the chair.
I'm not so sure about that. This is a question of ontology.
It is a question of ontology, but
I'm not so sure I'm willing to grant like a concrete mereology for chairs.
Well, I'm appealing to a bit more of a metaphysical model, but we don't need to even assume universals or a categorical idea. We can just like grant just the notion of a possibility that a thing could exist, regardless of, and it doesn't need to depend, that thing's existence is not dependent on the mind apprehending it.
The possibility of a thing's existence doesn't depend on the mind apprehending it?
Yes.
I'm not, I mean, I think that possibility is only, like, insofar as we can even, insofar as possibility exists, I think it only exists in the mind.
Yeah. Okay, so could the so that being the case, then consider the fundamental universal laws of physics, for instance.
Sure.
Yep. We can consider them in the mind to have come about a different way than how they actually have come about, right?
Perhaps. That might be naive,
yeah.
but perhaps.
I would agree with you on that notion, but just but we can just we can at least consider that, and we can consider things that existed prior to minds, and that they could have been different.
Yeah, but the possibility of them having been different, that exists only within the mind, because they weren't that way. That those things didn't exist, right?
Okay, so then did everything exist prior to minds? Everything that's come into existence, is it non-contingent? Like, does it have to be that way?
So if you're talking about like metaphysical contingency,
we're not talking about necessarily metaphysical. Well,
logical contingency, or physical contingency. I think that you could have. I think that like there's no logical contradiction in it having been a different way. But again, that could be naive. Yeah. I'm not so sure.
So like, okay, so for example, like if a tree existed before, if evolution existed before any mind existed, yep.
Mm-hmm.
But evolution could have gone about a different way.
Sure.
So evolution could go. So there's a possibility that evolution could have gone in a different way outside of the way that it currently did. Yep.
Yeah, I can conceptualize that possibility. Sure.
Yeah, and so that possibility, is that possibility something that is just within the mind, or is it something that can exist outside of the mind?
Because well, I think the possibility. I think kind of definitionally possibilities only exist in the mind.
I would simply
Because-
say that I disagree because
Well, because I mean, there are
we
the
can
way that
pre-
things are, and then there are
Yeah.
other ways that the world could have been, but those other ways don't exist anywhere except in our minds, where we're conceptualizing the way they could have been.
but if we so that in that sense, then we would simply have to say that matter couldn't have actually done that way and been possibly other than it actually is, because which we're basically, if we simply assent to possibility being something of the mind and not something within the object itself, then we are basically saying that the object is determined towards a particular way.
Oh, well, I am
The
a
mind can't
determinist.
simply.
Sorry, one sec.
Okay. Yep. Hello.
Sorry, I was just answering my wife. You're good.
No, all good, all good.
Yeah. So I am a
so you're
determinist.
Okay. So you're a determinist then.
Yeah.
So okay. As an so in that case, then I'm not too well versed with responding to determinism, because I think fundamentally, what's the point of having this discussion then if you're a determinist?
Because I don't have any other choice.
Well, you would consider that the mind can logically consider other possibilities.
Yeah, sure.
So the mind can logically consider other possibilities, but at the very least doesn't have a choice in actuation, in like
Yeah,
how we
roughly.
actuate things. So we're essentially just imprisoned minds within a cage.
Yeah. In fact, I think that even the consideration of other possibilities is determined.
Okay, so then we can't hold people morally liable for any moral actions that they do.
That's not true. It just depends on what your view on morals are. If your view on morals are if there is a proximal cause to some some action that we deem as bad, then we hold them morally responsible. If that's just what you call responsibility, then sure.
Well, I would say the matter that caused it is responsible, but not the mind that's within the matter.
Well, the mind is the matter, under my view.
Oh, well, so the mind is reducible to the matter?
At least that seems like plausible. It seems like super plausible
So
given
then why
what
can
we,
the
given what we
mind
know about minds.
so why can the mind consider logical possibilities outside of the matter?
What the mind is capable of considering has nothing to do with what the mind is made out of. I mean, like, or rather, I should rephrase.
But the mind is if you're saying that the mind is reducible to matter, right?
At least that seems plausible. Like I don't have a, like a consistent, like a, not I don't have like a fully determined theory of mind. I could be wrong about that, by the way.
Yep.
But at least that seems plausible to me.
So if matter has a particular power, right? So it has a power to go into causal effect.
Yeah.
But the mind is able to consider things outside of that causal effect and consider alternative causal effects, but can't do those things. So therefore, it's not in the power of the matter that it's considering things. Therefore, the mind is distinct from the matter.
Why can't the mind? Why can't matter create the sensation of considering things that are not actually happening? Like, just as an example.
Because it's not okay. So can
just
we
as
say
an
that
example. So a computer, we could certainly program a computer to simulate things that are not actually happening, right? That's you know, in some sense, that's what a human imagination is. I mean, like, obviously wildly simply reduced, but you know, just because the matter isn't actually doing the thing doesn't mean it can't imagine it.
But it's still but that's within the power of the computer to be able to do.
And the power of the mind is to be able to imagine things.
It's in the power of the computer, but it's still fundamentally the computer is still bound to do the thing that you're programming it to do.
Yeah, as is the human mind.
And so we're basically saying that the mind is fundamentally bound to even consider the possibilities and is bound even to that.
Sure.
So therefore, we can't actually consider the possibilities within the mind. It's actually within the matter then.
Well, I mean, all I'm talking about is a layer of abstraction on top of the matter. Like we the same
but
kind of way.
But if it's reducible to matter, then that means that the possibilities of which the mind considers is actually potential within the matter.
Else well, no. So the matter can represent So in the same way that in the same way that like a computer is just a bunch of silicon and like electrons, we can still program that computer to represent something far more complicated. Like it could simulate, DNA or whatever, which isn't present at all in the computer itself. So you can still have the computer representing and kind of conceptualizing things that are not of the computer itself. It's just kind of an abstraction that is represented by the particular configuration of matter.
So abstraction is within the power of matter, then?
Yeah, computers do it all the time.
Yeah, I would disagree, because computers fundamentally, their abstractive power is based upon the prior abstractive power of the person. A computer even within self-learning AI properties is still fundamentally learning based on a pattern of behavior which is predisposed by human behavior.
I would just say that in general, software is abstraction, because software in some sense is like a layer above hardware. Software can be can exist on the substrate of many different kinds of hardware and yet be the same software. And in that sense, it's an abstraction.
Yeah. So abstraction is just simply something that what would you define as abstraction then?
I would define it as a layer, like a conceptual layer or an informational layer that isn't dependent explicitly on the substrate in which it resides.
Okay.
So
I'm working with my understanding that we have two very different metaphysical models, or even models of understanding. So I'm trying to work with your model with my model, because I'm a scholastic model lightly, and I'm very bad at it. So I'm trying to understand those two different models and trying to sort of understand it, because my definition of abstraction would be just using metaphysical language for a second. The mind apprehends the object, it abstracts the object, it knows the object through a phantasm, but doesn't have the object itself within the mind, but has the phantasm. And so that is not something which is within the matter itself, but it is because if it's within the matter of either the mind's matter, or the matter of the object, then the changing of the mind's notion of that would change the matter or change the mind.
That's actually nearly like interpreted properly. That's actually nearly compatible with the definition that I gave, where essentially, I think that we roughly agree on what an abstraction is. I'm just saying that an abstraction is just some non one-to-one representation of a thing that can be represented on many different substrates. So in your language, this would be the phantasm that can exist in many different minds that corresponds to some physical thing.
Okay. So and the phantasm is not within the object itself, it's within the mind.
Right. In the same way that, the thing that you're like the YouTube video that you're watching is, you're not actually watching the real thing. You're watching, a video of a thing, a representation.
Oh yeah. Okay. So but the phantasm is not just simply something solely based upon the mind, though. It's also based upon the object as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's sure. So it could be solely based on it could be solely based upon
going
mind,
back, bringing it back to the point of considering the possibilities. While the consideration of the possibility is definitely within the mind, I'd agree. It's not just consideration it's not just a consideration of the mind itself, just as much as computer code processing the notion of a DNA. It's not processing the possibilities of what the DNA could do in certain environments. It's not just simply working within it's not just simply a product simply of the computer code, but it's also a process of the data of what the DNA is in itself. So just as much as I abstract the notion of a chair and what a chair can do, and the possibility of a chair doing something else, while it is of the mind that I'm logically thinking of that, it is still something that is. I'm trying to figure out a way to describe this. My metaphysical. It's still something that is not necessarily dependent on the mind, but it's dependent on the object. While the mind needs to see that within the object in order to be known, the potential of the knowledge itself is not inherent within the mind solely. It's also inherent within the object. Because if it's not inherent in the object, then what we're doing is essentially just making something up.
I think that there might actually be some middle ground here, because I think that we might actually a little bit agree. So the way I see it is like, you know, let's take the example of like planets orbiting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we were trying to like run a simulation or something like that, or conceptualize, you know, Mars, a planet comes, or like a rogue planet comes screaming through our solar system, and it deflects Mars's orbit and makes Mars collide with Earth. If we can conceptualize that is something that we can consider the possibility of. But that's not a thing that Mars is doing. The reason why we can conceptualize this is because we have lots of experience with lots of different things doing orbits, lots of different planets and asteroids and all sorts of things. And so we can combine those separate actual things conceptually in our mind in order to imagine things that are not that exist only in the mind. So while we take properties from the real world, we take the properties of Mars and the properties of rogue planets and the properties of Earth and the properties of orbits and the properties of gravity, we then combine them in a way that does not exist in the real world. And that only exists within the mind. The combination only exists within the mind. While these the measurements, observations. Okay, so then I think that we're roughly in agreement there.
I would agree with that as well. And I don't think people of a more classical metaphysics would necessarily agree with that. Strict line Aristotelians would think that no, it's in the object, solely in the object. But I would agree with that. And so I would say that, but it's simply not something that's within the mind also to consider those notions. It's also within the object to consider those. In the actual existence of the object, there is those things of which those trying to find a way to explain it. Sorry. When we consider the object, so for example, using your model, if a rogue planet came into that sort of sphere, and we put that sort of data set into that, things like that, and the planets acted in a particular way, the potential of the planets acting in that particular way is not simply just a product of mind.
What do you mean the potential?
But it is. So if we sent a rogue planet into our solar system, and it just flung through and sent Mars out of orbit, the potential for Mars to be sent out of orbit is not just something that the mind has created.
I don't think that the potential for Mars to do that is a thing that exists.
So then how's it coming into existence? If it's not potential, if it can't potentially exist,
I think that there is
that can actually happen.
I think that there are things that are actual that will happen, things that are actual that have happened, things that are actual that are happening.
Yep.
I don't know what you mean. Like the potential. The potential is a statement about possibility, and I think that those only exist in the mind.
And so, but that's presuppose. That's a circular argument. You're presupposing that
it's not circular. It's coherent.
And well, it's so circular arguments can be coherent, but.
Well, sorry, let me rephrase. I wasn't making an argument. I was just giving you my worldview here.
No. Yeah, and that's fine. I'm not trying to say that you're making an argument either, but your worldview, it presupposes that the potential doesn't exist, and then says that potential actuation exists in the future, but doesn't exist now. So that actuation, what is that? Where does that actuation come from?
I'm also an eternalist / B theory of time person. So like I view all moments of time equally real.
Okay.
Well, eternalism doesn't necessarily imply that, despite the name, but yes, I do think that the universe has likely always existed in one form or another.
Okay. See, I think fundamentally, if by the fact that we can consider the reality is contingent, we can't consider that as the point of reality, because look, working with that notion, then I don't actually have to argue even from possibilities. I can just argue from realities then, which makes my job a whole lot easier, because Scotus just simply argues from potential possibilities, but that because that allows us to get away from the notion of the classical notion of like causal argument itself, which they prove that God is a possibility, but they don't actually prove that God exists. It's just like, oh well, yeah, he could be a cause of things. It doesn't actually mean that he is a cause of things. But getting to the actual argument, then, things actually exist, and things actually could exist in another way, right?
Maybe. I'm not convinced that that's the case, but I can at least logically conceptualize that. Sure.
Yeah, you can logically conceptualize that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these things that actually exist could exist in another way.
And when we're talking about things, we mean like objects in the universe, right?
Yeah, objects in the universe.
Sure.
Yeah. So if we consider them as things that could exist prior, then they have to have like, if they're contingent, that they could have been something else, then they must be caused by something prior. Because if something is contingent, therefore it could have been another way, it must have been caused to be that way by a prior object.
Well, I mean, like, we could kind of approach this in two ways, but like granting that causality is a
Mhm.
thing, which I suspect that, you know,
Yeah.
in one form or another, I want to believe that it's real, even though I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine to say that, yeah, there's an infinite chain of causation.
No, but the thing is that we can't say that. So we're jumping ahead there. If we say there's an infinite chain of causation, but all those objects that existed within an infinite chain of causation are contingent, that
Mhm.
they could have been another way, then we don't actually have an explanation of the universe. We just have an infinite regress. And that doesn't
Yeah.
explain why things exist.
Well, I mean, I sort of take it as a brute
So-
fact that things have to exist, that there can't be nothing.
Yeah, so things have to exist. And so things have to exist either because of an infinite regress, which it doesn't explain it, it just sort of goes back infinitely.
Yep.
It either is, which doesn't actually give us an explanation. It doesn't give
Well,
us a why about the brute fact.
I mean,
it just sort of just says, oh,
each
it's always
event,
existed.
each event has some
Yeah.
proximal explanation, right?
Each event has some proximal explanation, but we don't actually have an actual.
We don't have an ultimate
actual
explanation.
theory.
I agree. Unless
we
you
don't
just
have an
say,
ultimate
unless you just say that this is how the universe is. But yeah, I agree with it. With an infinite regress, you don't have an
that's
ultimate
not actually
explanation.
giving us an ultimate explanation. That's just sort of saying that's just it is. It's
Well,
just
yeah, but
you're
it's just. Well, I mean, look. So Agrippa's trilemma is the statement that, with regards to explanation, there are essentially three categories, and that exhausts all possibilities. Either one, your explanation ends on a brute fact. Two, your explanation is an infinite regress of explanations and doesn't terminate. Or three, you have a chain, a circle, or a cycle of explanation that, A is explained by B, which is explained by C, which is explained by A. Regardless of your worldview, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in, whether you believe in Platonic whatevers, whether you're some sort of physicalist like me, we all get stuck on one of these three horns.
Oh yeah, and so my simple position is that we can't follow simply an infinite regress of contingents, because contingents, if they could have been another way, but yet they're not, they are this particular way because they exist in that particular way, then we can't actually explain the why. We can come to the Agrippa's position, but we don't actually have we can just say there's an infinite regress, but we don't actually have an explanation. Like, for example, if we said that it's a circular, that these contingent things are just circularly caused, that the universe is cyclical and it'll keep on doing itself over and over again, we don't actually have an explanation about why it's cyclical. We just we just sort of say it's cyclical. We don't actually have a notion about why these contingent things are the way they are. We just say, well, they're just doing this thing. So we don't actually have an explanation. We just have an assertion to a possible conclusion.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, the alternative is just saying, yes, this is the explanation, and I'm not going to tell you why.
Well, I would simply just say that contingent things can be either caused by something that's non-contingent or nothing.
Right. So if you demand that there's a necessary thing, a necessary explanation, then
we're jumping ahead a bit, because demanding a necessary, it demands a necessary explanation because things exist. Things exist as a brute fact, and there must be a why about things exist.
Well, there doesn't have to be. That's the PSR, but
sorry.
There doesn't have to be an explanation. That would be the PSR, principle of sufficient reason. But who says that we have to accept that? But look, all I'm saying is that if you say that the principle of sufficient reason is the principle of sufficient reason is just this notion that all things require an explanation.
Yeah.
But that's like a principle that you don't have to accept, right? Like there's you can either accept it or reject it.
But we in practical application, we do kind of expect that. You don't just simply expect me to just say God exists. and you should believe it. You
Well,
you
yeah.
expect the principle of sufficient reasoning. So,
so
you
we-
can't just use that in certain situations and then reject it in others. You have
Well,
to use it as a principle and be coherent.
I mean, the point is the point is you can reject the principle and just say that we require or we expect explanations for some things and we don't expect explanations for other things. You just don't have to
So
hold
why
to it
should
as
we
a
expect
principle.
explanations for some things and not explanations for other things?
Well, for
Why should
example,
we do that?
we might expect physical explanations for physical causes in the physical universe. For example, you know, I might expect that when I drop this little when I drop this fidget cube, that there's a physical explanation for why it falls. But we might not expect explanations for things about the entirety of the universe as a whole, because maybe that's in a different category of thing.
I'm not asking for explanations of the entirety of the universe as a whole. I'm just asking for an explanation of physical things. So
Well,
the
each physical thing will have an explanation, right?
Yes,
but it's the question of where does the entirety of the universe come from? That's a different question.
Well, I'm not arguing from the entirety of the universe. I'm just arguing because you're generalizing my argument to a point of where we're considering all contingent things. I'm not. I'm just simply saying a particular contingent thing must have a prior physical a physical contingent thing must have a prior physical explanation. But if we consider the reality of that thing, that it's contingent, then it cannot be simply explained by a prior contingent activity. Well, it can be, but then that prior contingent activity requires its own explanation. And we can't just simply then go on to an infinite regress, because then we don't actually have a physical explanation of this thing.
Well, we might not have an ultimate explanation, but we might not have an ultimate explanation, but we do have an explanation, right?
Well, you're making a distinction doesn't exist within a physical worldview. That you're saying that physical things must require an explanation, but then you're saying, but an ultimate explanation doesn't need to exist. But why?
Well, no, I could say something like I could say something like physical things must require like a proximal explanation or something like that.
Yeah. But why should we make the distinction between a proximal and a remote explanation? So, for example,
I mean, it just might be useful. It might be practical, right?
But it's not logically necessitous.
I never said it was.
Exactly. So if it's not logically necessitous, then it's something that doesn't explain it. And if it doesn't explain it, therefore we can collapse that distinction and just simply say that physical cause requires prior explanation. And so we need to consider that. So if physical cause requires prior explanation, then we need to consider, regardless if it's remote or proximate, we need to consider that in order to be able to explain the thing ultimately. And so this would therefore then mean that we should look for an ultimate explanation.
Well, look, but so what it sounds like you're saying is that actually Agrippa's trilemma is false.
Yep.
The two of the horns are just not valid means of explanation. So then,
I would say.
So then that means that. So it sounds like you're saying we need an ultimate explanation, but then the ultimate explanation is not explained.
Well, that's the point of the ultimate explanation. So that we would either say that going with.
But then it's no explanation at all.
It is an explanation. So just positing the argument, contingent things can't cause prior contingent things with an infinite regress. Because that doesn't actually give us an explanation. It just leads to an infinite regress, which just sort of says, well, that's just the way. It doesn't give an explanation. It just points to something of which we just don't know. We don't actually have a positive knowledge of things. We just sort of saying, well, contingent things have infinitely existed, and we don't know why it actually exists.
But that's what the brute fact explanation does too. That's what the necessary ultimate explanation does.
So the brute fact in both situations is that things actually exist.
Sorry, I'm using brute fact in a different way. So the brute fact explanation is you have some chain of explanation and then it terminates at something that you just accept as a brute fact, and that's your ultimate explanation. And that thing has that brute fact, that ultimate explanation itself has no explanation. Now, I might call that the initial state of the universe. You might call that God. But the point is that regardless of what we call that brute fact that then explains everything that comes after it, that brute fact has no explanation, which means that that it just is that way.
The universe, you've generalized the notion of the universe with the conception of God, because the universe could have started in a different way. Therefore, it's not actually a non-contingent thing.
I mean, maybe.
But we can consider that with maths, and we can consider the realities of the universe and consider the possibilities of them changing. And that's not something that's just merely within the concept. Well, it's within
It
the
might be.
mind working with the universe. It's still something. Did the universe have to begin?
I mean, I don't think it did begin. Right, that's the whole business of having always existed.
Yeah. So would you suggest that to be a circular universe? Like, so for example, there is a mass the universe massively condenses itself, and then the Big Bang begins, and then we kind of go into a cyclical motion like that, or would you just say
I'm agnostic on that.
Okay. Well, the point being, I do reject Agrippa's trilemma, because I think the simple fact is that when we ask for an explanation of something, we're not just simply sort of going like, we're not just simply expecting something that's logically coherent. We're expecting something that's logically coherent that sort of explains why this is so. So, for example, if I drop the example that you said of dropping the cube onto the table, we sort of go, well, why is the cube falling onto the table? Well, I dropped it, and we consider that a sufficient reasoning because we presuppose we have in our mind a knowledge that people can do that, because people can act contingently.
Just to be clear,
and yep.
maybe it'll make my point better, or help illustrate the point that I'm bringing up better. So what would you say is the ultimate cause?
I would say it's a non-contingent being. That's something that something that by itself, by its nature, it's not something that could have been anything different. That it is just non-contingent.
So why is it so why does it exist?
Because it's non-contingent.
Okay, why is it non-contingent?
Because that's a circular reasoning, which is true, that it's non-contingent because it's non-contingent. It's just reasserting the fact. It exists.
So there's no explanation. There's no explanation. It's you're just saying, well, that's just how it is.
Non-contingent. We're considering the contingent realities of the universe. It doesn't require an explanation because it's non-contingent. Contingent things require explanations because they could have been something different.
But my point is that, well, now we don't have an explanation for why the universe is the way it is. It just terminates at something, and we don't know why it is that way.
From this argument, you're right. You're right. We don't actually have an explanation of why the universe exists as per towards an end, as in towards its tendency, but we do have an explanation of where it began.
No, we don't, because you just go back the chain the entire way, and then you end up at this thing that, for reasons that we have no explanation for, is non-contingent.
Yeah.
But now we don't. But now we have no explanation for why it is that way.
No, we do have reasons to explain why it's non-contingent, because we would have to say that contingent things can't just simply cause an infinite regressive contingencies. Because then why do things actually come into existence, or why are things even possible?
But that's begging the question, right? Now you're just saying, well, it had to be non-contingent because the alternative is impossible. But you haven't defended why the alternative is impossible.
Because
you're just asserting it is.
Okay, so going back to the example of the cube being dropped on the table, the cube could have not been dropped. Yep.
Perhaps.
So the cube actually being dropped.
And by the way, if you're a determinist, then it had to be that way. By the way.
Well, we can still consider the notion of which it could have not happened.
Yeah, you can think about like logical possibility, but not.
Yeah,
but
and the logical possibility is not just simply the logical possibility is not simply the product of the mind. It is something.
Well, that was the point of disagreement earlier,
matter.
Right?
No, we agreed on the notion that it's not just simply within that the mind does work with matter in that sort of situation. While we agreed on the notion that it's not just simply. I would agree with you that logic is not just simply inherent within matter, that it does require a mind in order to exist. But the simple fact is that logic also isn't just simply begotten of the mind. It's something that the mind works with matter with and predates them, and it's neither something that's just simply inherent within the mind either. It's not just we don't just simply have logic in the mind either.
Well, so the way I view logic is I view it as like an observed set of relationships. So in the same way that like we can observe that a flower is red, we can observe that things are themselves, for example. But the point is that yes, while I agree, we derive our laws of logic from observations of how the way the world works. That doesn't mean that the logical possibilities that we can derive from those laws of logic have any sort of reality to them.
So then we can't actively so if there is no actual reality to the logical possibilities that we observe, why do we do science? Like, why should we?
We're trying to predict the future.
If our logic, sorry,
we're trying to predict the future, and I could also just say because we have no choice.
So we can predict the future. So our logic can have a reliable observation of reality.
I would just say that that's not a possibility. That's how it has to be if we're doing science properly.
What would you mean by that?
Well, look, if you're doing science properly, if you've done good science, then this is not a possibility. This is a requirement of what will happen, not a possibility of what might happen.
So in the situation, I think it will happen. So if going back to the model of the cosmic model, if the planet comes, if a rogue planet comes into our solar system and pulls planets out of orbit, yes.
You there?
Hello? Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was just cracking.
Did you hear what I just said? Or?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So if a rogue planet comes into if a rogue planet comes into the solar system, it'll pull planets out of orbit. That will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we can consider the possibility of that happening. And if it does happen, then that's an accurate predictor.
Yeah, otherwise we were just wrong.
Yeah. And so, okay. I apologize if I'm a bit incoherent with this, and I'm trying to.
It's fine. You're fine. It's also potentially on me. You're down under, so it's like 11 o'clock for you or something like that, or like 9 o'clock. It's 11:30 at night.
9:30. It's 9:30. I woke up like 2 hours ago.
I woke up like 19 hours ago, so I'm reaching my limit anyway.
No, that's very fair. But look, my point being, I think if we just simply assert that logic is within the mind, like that logic as we observe it as a possibility in the universe is just simply a product of the mind, then we're simply asserting. My problem would be is that we're essentially arguing for what is essentially a miracle, that it's miraculous that our logic in the mind simply just aligns with the world always. It aligns with the world when it's logically coherent and has sufficient data.
I don't know if that's a miracle. I think it was constructed to do just that.
Well, what constructs it then?
We did.
So our mind is constructed to be able to do that then?
Oh, no. I mean, our mind constructed the logic.
So our mind constructs the logic based upon the reality.
Yeah.
So our mind is building. So logic then is kind of like our mind is constructing something based off of a model of reality. Kind of like if I've got a Lego set and I'm trying to replicate based off of like a real thing.
Yeah, well, I would say it's more like a list of observations that we find a common pattern in.
Okay, but the common pattern is something. The fact that we can observe a common pattern implies that that common pattern doesn't simply exist within the mind.
So that's.
And if it is simply something in the mind, then it is a miracle that the mind can be able to observe that.
So that's an interesting question. This is a question of why is there uniformity in nature? That I kind of just grant as just a thing that I don't know if we can ever even in principle know the answer to.
We could just simply grant that there's logic.
Well,
this is something that's like.
I mean, I don't know what it means for there exists logic outside of the mind. I agree that there is uniformity in nature, and that uniformity is what gives rise to logic in the mind.
Yeah.
But I don't think
you can't explain why uniformity of nature exists.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can. I think that's like fundamentally unexplainable.
I think that you're presupposing your point in order to because if we just if we're simply saying logic is of the mind, then you're 100% right. But if we but that's presupposing the point that logic is of the mind. If we look upon the world and say that there is a logic to the world, then it's not something merely of the mind.
What does it mean to say there is a logic of the world? Logic is
That
like
the
a
world-
descriptive language game, right?
The world acts within a particular sort of mode of cause and effect in various principles. So, for example, a square can't be a circle, and works within these various things that the mind can apprehend and logically work with.
So, I agree that there is a way in which the world behaves.
Mhm.
You know, electrons do certain things to other electrons, for example.
Yeah.
Stars do certain things to planets. There is a certain way in which the world is. But I think that where I get lost is when people start saying that there is logic in that. Like, logic is a language game. It's a description, right?
Also,
in the same
logic
way
as
that
an
like a
You're
flower
conflating-
might be red, but like red doesn't exist out in the world. Red is like a thing that we came up with to describe our observations.
You're conflating language. You're conflating linguistics with logic itself. So, for example,
That's not a conflation. I'm a nominalist.
Well, I would simply say that it is a conflation. That yes, while red is something that as a concept within the mind doesn't actually exist within the world, it's based upon a real concept. That's something that exists and something that's consistently observable. For example, if I observe a red flower and I observe a red car, those two things have a common trait that the mind isn't just simply making up. While it's using language to understand that, and the language is the construct, there is something outside of the mind that is common between those two things. Else
Yeah,
then
they
we're just
interact with the
simply saying-
electromagnetic spectrum in the same way. Sure.
So then they work within a system outside of the mind that works consistently in a pattern.
So look. So I've already agreed, and I think that
Mhm.
I think I already said this, that the universe behaves in a particular consistent way. Certain people say things like certain particles have certain objects have certain powers, and that's what it means for it to behave in that way. And I agree that it behaves that way. I don't think that we have an explanation for that, because the way that I view logic.
They're conflating the notion between that there is some sort of language in the proper sense of which there's some universal notion of red, that's something of which we can consider the notion of linguistically red. The notion of I can't remember the linguist who was brilliant in being able to assert this, is that the notion of red
is probably Chomsky. It's always Chomsky.
It's not Chomsky. It predated him. It was 1930.
Okay.
Chomsky. I mostly
Was it
trust
Wittgenstein?
Chomsky because he was.
I feel like if it's modern linguistics, it's Chomsky, and if it's old linguistics, it's Wittgenstein. It seems how it always is.
It was modern linguistics before Chomsky, because Chomsky is not just modern linguistics. There is a bit more linguistics up
Sure.
than Chomsky. But the thing of the notion that the sign is what we attribute the object, and the sign is ultimately arbitrary. But the fact is that there is an object. The fact that there's a consistent notion of the object within the object, that there is something that exists, that there is a natural consistency within the universe. I'm not arguing that natural consistency then has I'm arguing simply the fact that natural object exists, that we both observed. And that natural object, therefore, adheres to something that we could call logic.
And that's where we differ.
We observe in the object, and it's not something that is simply made up in the mind.
That's where we differ. I get a little bit lost when people start talking about adhering. What does it mean for what is happening? What is actually happening when we say that an electron adheres to a law? What does that actually mean? Is the electron aware of the law?
If an electron is in a particular relation relative to protons and neutrons, it makes up a particular element. That is always the case.
Yeah, sure.
Why?
At least that's how we label these things. Why? I think that this is the uniformity of nature that I just don't think we have a good explanation for.
And the uniformity of nature denotes then, therefore, that there is a way the which nature acts. That nature, if it is observed, acts consistently.
Yep.
We can attribute to that acting consistently a logic.
I don't know, but that's a description, not a prescription.
What would you mean by that?
What I mean is that we see this consistency, and so we describe it in a
Yeah.
certain way. We describe
Oh
its
yeah, we describe,
consistency
and
with
that
the language of
description can be
logic. But the
Yeah.
actual thing, the thing that is, but to say that there is logic therefore governing it is a mistake, I think.
So what governs?
I don't think that we can talk about what governs nature. I don't think that we have access to that information.
I think the simple. I think we're getting a bit caught up in this sort of point, and I'm not sure we'll be able to get to a consistency and agreeing on this, because I think the point being is that I would not say I think it would be. I would agree in the notion that from your position, it's an equivocation to say that there is a logic in the in nature, and that's the same as the logic in the mind. It's not. It's an equivocation to sort of say that those two things are the same thing. The mind's logic is different from how things actually, like, the mind can be wrong about how the world governs itself in that predictable manner. But that doesn't therefore then mean that there isn't in itself that reality has that power to move in that way and always moves in that way. That doesn't then mean that there is then something that is a logic to that power. Now, we observe that, and in the mind we observe that, and then we can consider that, and therefore the science that comes out of that is logic. But it's not something that there is something within the matter itself, within the powers of the matter itself, that always does that can be observed. And we can call this a logic of the universe. While it's not the same as the logic of the mind, because the logic of the mind presupposes a mind, but we don't need to presuppose a mind for the universe, there is still a logic in the universe that can be observed in the mind.
So when you say logic of the universe, then what do you mean? I'm making the best way to describe it would be, well, if I would presuppose theism, I would actually say that they're univocal, but that's presupposing theism. And I don't want to presuppose theism because I think I'm a foundationalist. I don't think I can just simply presuppose theism. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I despise presuppositionalism.
Oh, it's so annoying.
It is. I as someone who is in a lot of theological discussion, I despise presuppositionalism because it presupposes the point. I think presuppositionalism is great when you're trying to teach, because in order to teach a position, it's great to start with the end in mind and then work towards that end and teach that. But when we're actually trying to find out empirical knowledge or just logical knowledge or anything, we can't
or convince anybody of anything.
Yeah.
Like it's terrible.
Yeah, I'm a uni student at the moment, going to a Catholic university, and I hate it because they're asking me to presuppose so many different things, and I don't like it because a lot of these people are very intelligent people. They can work out the reasoning of God, and they can think about these things on their own. They don't need to be then told to presuppose that God exists, and then we'll just sort of work it out there. I'm very much with you on that notion that I don't like.
Well, I appreciate that,
and I'm very glad that, because I find in my discussion with some atheists, they will presuppose things. But even in the notion of, I would say that there has been a bit of, we are presupposing that logic is within the mind.
Well, I think that we both agree that logic certainly is within the mind. The question is
it certainly is within the mind.
Is it anywhere else? That's the question, right?
That's a good question. And I would say that because the mind consistently observes these things within the universe, it consistently can observe these things. While it's not the logic in the same sense of how we can say the mind has logic, because if it is, therefore God exists, because the logic would need a mind, but we shouldn't presuppose that. There is logic within the universe, at the very least, in a certain way of which we could describe it, that there is always that A always leads to B and B always leads to C. So in logic, in a general sense, that A to B to C.
That just sounds like causality.
Well, causality is part of logic.
I wouldn't say so.
What would make you say that? I would just, because we fundamentally come to comprehend causality within the mind.
By the way, I just want to, and this is completely unrelated, but I think somebody in my TikTok chat teaches at the university that you go to.
Oh.
Which is you don't have to dox yourself, but apparently
No,
there's
no,
three campuses in Sydney. Does that sound right?
There's 3 campuses.
I don't
one in,
know.
I think there's 2 in Sydney. I'm fine with. Look, I'm fine. I don't care about my personal identity. Google's already got half of it anyway. I'm not at ACU.
Okay. Anyway, it's not relevant. I just thought it was very funny. Yeah. So we were talking about causality. Look, I mean, like, I understand that causality at least seems kind of linked to logic in the sense that we think of like, we kind of like when we think of like propositional logic, like we can think of implications like A implies B, and we kind of mix that up with causality, that A causes B, but that's not really correct. That's not. Let me rephrase. That's often correct, but that's not always correct. You can say that, for example, that like a mathematical theorem, you can have mathematical implications, but there's no causation there, right?
But okay, so if gravity is pulling an object in a particular way towards the Earth, and therefore the object will always move towards the Earth in a particular way, the reason why I would say that A, which is gravity, causes B to move in a particular way would be different is not because the law has changed, but because there's an extraneous variable that exists, that's such as C, the moon. So, or so, for example, some things will be in space because not just simply because the Earth is there and pulling it down to the ground, but also because the moon pulls it away. Waves exist because the moon pulls things up, and
tell that to flat earthers.
Yeah. Like I'm strange in my positions, but my goodness, flat Earth is horrible.
So this is a good conversation, but I'm getting very very sleepy because it's almost midnight.
Yeah, that's fair, and we
so
don't need to.
So do you have Discord?
I haven't logged into it in a while. I'm a bit of a Luddite. Like for most of the past 3 years, I've been working on a dumb phone.
Dumb phone. That's brilliant. Anyway, well, okay. I mean, you're always welcome to come back on at a later date, but I think I'm going to end the live. The only reason I say that is because I have a Discord server. There's a link in the thing. So if you want to join, and then like, you know, having offline conversations is easier, because they can be that'd be awesome. But yeah, I think I am going to end the live. But what should I call you? Recap.
Recap's fine, yeah.
Recap, it was a delight, and I want to thank you for being here. It was
thank you very much.
Probably the best conversation I've had in a long time. So anyway, yeah, keep studying well. You seem to be doing a pretty good job, and I guess have a good night, everybody.
All right, have a
take care.
Night. See ya.
All right, and to everybody who's watching, thank you guys for sticking around and enjoying. Oh, Che S with the $10. I'm glad you caught the live too. Yeah, Recap was awesome. And if you're still watching Recap, contact. I don't know how they would contact you, Chapter. You're watching on TikTok. They were on YouTube. There's somebody that would at your university that would love to talk to you, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. If you're still watching Recap Chapter, do you want to shout out how they can contact you? And I can let them know over the chat or over the voice or something. They're on different platforms. They're not they can't DM. There's no DMing to be done. Otherwise I don't know how to put you two in contact. Yeah, Recap, if you can join the Discord, then Challenge might be able to join the Discord, and then you guys can talk there. But anyway, for everybody who's been watching, for everybody who's liked the live, everybody who's followed along, everybody who's joined the Discord, thanks for being here. It was a delight. It was a good Friday. Oh, see what I did there? Take care, everybody.